Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Diogo Goncalves. Albufeira, a beautiful resort town, is one of the most visited places in the Algarve region of southern Portugal. It was there, in 1999, that Diogo was born. He is the only child of a poor but hardworking family whose income mainly depended on the of tourism. Diogo's parents saw him as a good son, and those who knew him described him as decent, responsible, hardworking, and reliable. He was also a very outgoing young man who loved being surrounded by friends and family. Diogo went to high school in his hometown. After graduating, he started studying computer science. To fund his education and support his family, he got a job at McDonald's in 2015 when he was just 16. At 17, while still working there, his life became miserable when his father suffered a stroke and fell into a vegetative state, as reported by the media. That same year, while Diogo and his mother were dealing with his father's health crisis, another tragedy struck. His mother, who had always supported his learning and growth, was hit by a car on her way to work at the mall, where she cleaned. The car dragged her several meters, leading to her falling into a ditch where she died from her injuries. Although the driver fled, but the police identified him and he faced trial. While he was waiting for the conviction of the person responsible for his parents' suffering, Diogo needed to be transferred to a medical unit where he received the necessary care. His maternal aunt, worried about his situation, had suggested that he move in with her. However, they had a serious disagreement, and after a few weeks, it became impossible for them to continue living together. Diogo explained what was happening to his friend, who offered him a room in his house in the Aldea neighborhood, also in Albufeira. At the time, the closeness to the friend's relatives helped Diogo feel at home. Despite his young age, Diogo demonstrated great ability to handle and overcome difficult situations with patience and optimism. In 2017, at just 18 years old, Diogo graduated with a degree in computer technology and completed a 6-month internship at Vila Vida Park, a leading 5-star hotel. His impressive work led the executives to offer him a position as a technician. In 2018, Diogo accepted the offer and left his job at a fast food restaurant chain, where he had worked for nearly a year and had become a duty manager. This thing a new chapter in his life, filled with opportunities to advance after overcoming difficult times. After working at the company for some time and anticipating better days ahead, he decided to buy a car. Diogo got along well with his co-workers, especially Maria Malvero, a 19-year-old security guard at the hotel. Maria, like Diogo, comes from a family with difficult circumstances and faces her own challenges. Her mother had mental health issues, and her father left when she was very young. She never spoke to him again. Maria, interested in martial arts, practiced karate and aspired to be a police officer. However, her application to the police academy was rejected due to her tattoo. Disappointed, she decided to study at Securinfo, a company that trains security guards in various private security fields. Diogo was interested in Maria and made his feelings known from the start, but she did not feel the same way and treated him coldly. Fabio Acosta, a close friend of Diogo, said that Diogo was deeply in love with Maria. He was so infatuated that he declined a well-paying job offer from the Sheraton hotel chain in Lisbon because he didn't want to be away from her. Additionally, he would bring her meals when she was working. Over time, they became very close, and people around them assumed they were a couple. However, there was no romantic relationship between them. Maria told Diogo she didn't want anything to do with him because she had just ended a toxic relationship with a naval officer, yet she was still giving him false hopes. Diogo never gave up hope for a future with Maria and sought opportunities to be near her and make her happy in various ways. One day, he was deeply disappointed when he saw a video on social media of Maria kissing another girl. Diogo was upset because he believed she should have told him that she wasn't interested in men and that this was why they could never be together. Fabio, Diogo's best friend, tried to reassure him by saying that girls often do this, but Diogo was not convinced. He insisted that she had lied to him and that was why she had rejected him. Despite the disappointment, Diogo and Maria stayed friends, and she continued to accept his gifts and invitations for dates. Several times, Diogo offered to walk her home, but she always said her roommate had a jealous boyfriend and she didn't want to bring another man into the apartment. As time went on, in December 2019, Diogo learned that he would finally receive compensation for his mother's death, which had occurred 3 years earlier. After receiving the payment amount of up to 70,000 euros, Diogo decided it was time to buy a house to avoid continuing to pay rent. He shared the good news with his friend Maria, who left her job at the hotel a few weeks later. Maria stated that she could no longer stand the colleagues' comments about the relationship between her and Diogo. She also explained that she wanted to spend more time with her mother, who needed a lot of attention due to a mental illness. At that moment, there was no reason to doubt her words. However, subsequent incidents suggest that her decision to leave the hotel was motivated by dark reasons, and this is where the third character in the story, Mariana Fonseca, 20 years old, comes in. Mariana worked as a nurse at the hospital and had a dear relationship with Maria. They both lived together in Mariana's parents' house, because they still do not have enough money to have their own home where they could enjoy their relationship. When Maria discovered the substantial amount of money Diogo, she started getting closer to he. It seems Maria shared this information with Mariana, and they decide to trick Diogo in order to gain access to his bank account and steal the compensation money. After Maria repeatedly refused to date Diogo, one day, she told him she wanted to spend a romantic evening with him. This was a significant surprise for Diogo, who was overjoyed and couldn't believe his luck. After waiting for so long, he was ecstatic about finally being with the girl he loved. They planned the meeting for Friday evening, March 20th, 2020. Diogo was thrilled and didn't question why Maria had suddenly changed her mind. Maria and Mariana had different accounts of the incident that day, but here are the facts according to media reports based on official information. When Diogo entered, Maria offered him some orange juice she had brought. However, the drink contained an unexpected ingredient, diindawomethane, DIM, a drug affecting the central nervous system, with analgesic and sedative properties. Maria using the drug, which she had stolen from the hospital. Her plan was to sedate Diogo, access his banking information, and manipulate his fingers to unlock his phone. Mariana waited in a car outside while Maria executed the plan. Mariana even texted she several times to check if the drug had taken effect, as it was taking longer than expected. The situation inside the house became increasingly more tense. Diogo didn't understand what was happening and started to feel anxious. Maria then tries to calm him down by promising to show him an erotic dance, but first she has to tie him to a table. After being restrained for a few minutes, Diogo panicked and asked Maria to release him, but she became aggressive, leading to a struggle. Using her martial arts skills, she subdued Diogo by knocking him to the floor and choking him, prevent him from breathing. According to Mariana's testimony, Maria later instructed her to enter the apartment. Upon entering, Mariana found Diogo on the floor. She questioned Maria about the incident and criticized her for going beyond their plans, which was to steal his keys and take his money. Seeing Diogo unresponsive, Mariana began resuscitation efforts. When he woke up, he was extremely agitated and attempted to attack she. It seems he realized that Mariana was plotting against him, led him to try to defend himself. In response to Diogo's aggression towards Mariana, Maria intervened by grabbing him from behind, bringing him to the ground, and restraining him by squeezing his neck again. Diogo's life ended tragically at the hands of the girl he loved, Maria. His body was found in the living room of Maria and Mariana's house, where they continued with their planned robbery. They first severed his thumb and index finger to unlock his phone, access a mobile payment app, and transfer money. This process took several days because there was a limit on the amount that could be transferred each day. When he learned that Diogo had work scheduled the next day, Mariana and Maria tried to prevent his colleagues from noticing his absence, searching for him, and reporting him missing. One of Diogo's colleagues received a text from his number stating that he couldn't make it to work that day and needed someone to cover for him. Diogo's colleague, who disliked last-minute shift changes, found the request odd. Diogo asked if everything was okay and received a simple yes in response. The conversation among Diogo's co-worker and others continued throughout Friday and part of Saturday, but the unusual messages increasingly seemed uncharacteristic of him. One person receiving these messages was Diogo's supervisor. One message said that Diogo wouldn't be returning to work because he had met a woman in France and planned to move in with her. This explanation seemed odd to the supervisor because Diogo was a responsible employee and wouldn't leave his job so abruptly. To find the answer, the supervisor attempted to call Diogo but received no answer. Later, he got a message stating that Diogo was not in to talk on the phone. The supervisor responded, saying he could only feel reassured if they spoke. He wanted to hear Diogo's voice and wanted to know what was happening. Diogo's loved ones reacted to messages sent by Maria and Mariana, in which they pretended to be Diogo. This prompted they to alter their plan for explaining Diogo's sudden disappearance. They decided to make it appear as if Diogo had ended his life and planned to dismember his body to get rid of the evidence. Maria later mentioned that their actions were inspired by the TV show Dexter, featuring a forensic scientist who killed criminals and disguised his crimes by dismembering their bodies. After executing their horrific plan, Mariana and Maria placed Diogo's body in trash bags in the trunk of their car. They then went to an ATM and shopped at a mall, where they were seen hugging and laughing on security cameras. Following this, they returned to Mariana's home to begin dismembering Diogo's body. Ultimately, they put Diogo's torso in a black bag and discarded the other parts in a container. Meanwhile, Diogo's friends launched a campaign to report him as missing and reached out to the authorities. The authorities then waited the required 48 hours before officially declaring him missing. Mariana and Maria left the house, with Maria getting into Diogo's car to drive to a cliff near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. Mariana followed behind in her own car. Around 2 p.m. that day, Mariana threw Diogo's torso off the cliff and abandoned his car nearby. They planned to make it seem like he had jumped voluntarily. However, instead of falling into the sea, the remains got stuck on a rock. Finally, Mariana and Maria drove together in Mariana's car for about 12 minutes, covering 7 kilometers, to the Inferno Dago waterfall in Tavira, where they disposed of the rest of Diogo's body in the water. Shortly after, Diogo's car was discovered in a parking lot near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. A newspaper report stated that 2 laptops were found inside the car, led forensic police to investigate. A land and sea search was launched, leading to the discovery of a young man's torso partially covered by a black garbage bag. Meanwhile, at another location along the coast, a French couple found the young man's head at Inferno Toigo. Diogo's hands and feet were later recovered during an intensive police search. The investigators assigned to the case found the details surrounding Diogo's death unusual. They noted that he was a quiet man who don't hang out with bad people. As the police continued their investigation, they discovered that Diogo had received a significant payout following his mother's death. While examining money orders, they found that a large sum had been transferred from Diogo's account to someone named Maria. Naturally, the detectives' next move was to locate Maria to understand why she had received money from Diogo. Maria attempted to persuade the police that she killed Diogo in self-defense, claiming he was trying to abuse her. She stated that this was why she had left the hotel prior to the incident. However, a review of the text messages between Diogo and Maria, they showed that her claims were false. After Maria stopped working, she and Diogo grew close. During her initial meeting with the police, Maria insisted that she was entirely responsible for planning and carrying out the incident that led to the shooting. Maria clarified that Mariana was not involved in the crime at all. However, Mariana's account of the incident contradicted what Maria's claimed. Mariana reported that Maria to wanting to steal Diogo's money and intended to kill him. She stated that Maria's plan was to make him suffer in order to extract his bank account password. Investigators gathered enough evidence to convict both girls, Mariana and Maria, including phone records, the Diogo's cell phone, and ATM surveillance footage. Maria and Mariana were arrested on April 1, 2020, and faced court in June of that year. The judge carefully reviewed the incidents that Maria described. Maria remained steadfast in her confession and denied any involvement Mariana's. She stated that Diogo's body was in a suitcase in a car parked in the garage for 2 days, and it was there that the dismemberment took place, while Mariana's family was sleeping. After hearing Maria's detailed testimony about the incidents, the judge repeatedly asked her Mariana was during the dismemberment, as which had been done with surgical precision at the joints. All attention in the courtroom turned to the nurse, Mariana. She anticipated the questions and clarified that, since everyone was aware of her employment at the hospital, they mistakenly thought she was responsible for dismembering the corpse. She said that dismemberment could easily be done by using information on the internet. The judge imposed a detention order on both Mariana and Maria, citing that they had committed a serious crime in a creepy, calculated, reckless, and extremely brutal manner. A few months later, on February 24, 2021, the trial began. During her testimony on February 26, 2021, Maria claimed that she initially wanted revenge on Diogo because he had abused her, but did not intend to kill him. She admitted that her goal was to humiliate him and clarified that Mariana had no relationship with Diogo. Mariana and Maria attended court together but did not make eye contact during the trial. It is rumored that after the arrest and subsequent jail time, they decided to end their friendship. The trial included testimonies from several witnesses, including forensic expert Teresa Costa. She explained that the level of diphenhydramine found in Diogo's blood was much lower than expected from the 3 ampoules, suggesting that he either did not take the prescribed dose or had taken it many hours before his death. On April 27, 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Maria Malvero was convicted of several serious crimes, including aggravated murder, destroy the body, robbery, unauthorized access, fraud, carjacking, and possession of an illegal weapon. As a result, she received a 25-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €265,000 in compensation to Diogo's father. Mariana Fonseca, on the other hand, was acquitted of murder but found guilty of destroy the body, complicity, and fraud. She received a 4-year prison sentence but was released because none of her convictions required pre-trial detention, at least until the final sentencing. The court determined that Mariana's effort to save life Diogo indicated that she did not intend to kill him. The judge based his decision on a confession from she, in which she accepted full responsibility for her actions. However, this verdict was not accepted by the Portuguese public, who viewed Mariana as equally guilty of the serious crime against Diogo alongside Maria. After the verdict, Mariana exited the courtroom through a separate exit where her father, who had attended all the hearings, was waiting. Neither of them spoke to the media. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Lenway. Nicole Lenway, also known as Nikki, was born on July 11, 1989, in a small town in northern Minnesota. Unfortunately, there is limited information available about her parents and early life. It is reported that her father left the family at a young age, leaving her mother to raise her alone and work hard to provide a good education. Nikki excelled academically and was a skilled athlete, particularly in track and field and martial arts. During her final years of high school, she decided to pursue a career in law enforcement to fight crime. She studied hard and trained physically to meet the admission requirements for the police academy. After graduating from high school with honors, Nikki enrolled in the police academy and relocated from her small hometown to Minneapolis in 2010. Nikki was hired as an assistant investigator at the Minneapolis Police Headquarters Criminal Investigation Department, where she worked diligently for several years before being promoted to investigator. Her colleagues praised her as a driven, results-focused woman and a fearless officer who was willing to take risks. However, in her personal life, Nikki unknowingly became entangled with a skilled manipulator. Nikki's ill-fated relationship began in 2012 at a Taekwondo competition, where she met Timothy, a coach and martial arts expert who was 8 years her senior. Initially, Timothy didn't make a strong impression on Nikki, but she caught his attention with her striking beauty, long hair, and charming smile. Notably, Timothy had a reputation as a ladies' man, with a history of frequent romantic partners and a tendency to date multiple women simultaneously. Timothy was confident in his ability to win over women he was interested in and wasn't used to being rejected. After finding out that Nikki lived in Minneapolis, he discovered where she worked out and got her phone number. Initially, he offered to be her personal trainer, but soon he started pursuing a romantic relationship with her. Nikki was quickly drawn to Timothy's kind, open, and charming personality, and she developed strong feelings for him. Before long, she found herself deeply in love with him. Their romantic relationship began, and they started dating. At first, the man was charming, attentive, and made a point to show he was dependable. Timothy had a strong presence, was intelligent, and had a persuasive way with words that often dominated the women he was with. As the relationship progressed quickly, after a month and a half, they decided to move in together. The first 6 months were wonderful, and Nikki felt happy and loved living with Timothy. She opened up to him, trusting him completely, believing they had no secrets between them. However, over time, Timothy's behavior started to change, revealing his true nature. At first, the changes were subtle, and Nikki didn't notice anything out of the ordinary for a while. Timothy, a charming and muscular man, was always proud of his success with women. Despite being in a serious relationship with Nicole, he continued to flirt with other women, often in her presence, which hurt and humiliated her. At first, Nikki hoped that Timothy would eventually change his ways and settle down, but as time passed, nothing changed. Timothy reassured her of his love and was passionate and tender as a partner, but outside of their relationship, he continued to flirt with other women and was known to have affairs. Nikki's jealousy started to get on his nerves, and he began lashing out at her. He would tell her that he could do what he wanted and she had no right to control him. Despite this, he would later apologize and reassure her that no one could ever love her as much as he did. Nikki would forgive him, and they would continue making plans for their future. Timothy and Nikki's relationship turned dark in fall 2014. During an argument, Timothy grabbed Nikki's throat, but released her just before she lost consciousness. He then pushed her, causing her to fall and hit a wall. The incident made Nikki realize the relationship was toxic, but her emotional attachment kept her from leaving. She eventually forgave him after he apologized. During the course of their relationship, several disturbing characteristics of Timothy became apparent. Most troubling was his intense jealousy and fixation on controlling his partner's every move. He frequently checked her phone without her consent, scrutinizing her calls, messages, contacts, and social media activity, and kept a record of her conversations and whereabouts. This pattern of behavior continued for years. Timothy was prone to irrational outbursts, unjustly accusing his partner of infidelity, while he himself was unfaithful. He would often resort to physical violence, yet managed to convince his partner that no one else could ever love her as much as he did. If she threatened to leave the relationship, Timothy claiming that he would take his own life and that she would be responsible for his death. In November 2015, Nikki decided to leave the house after another violent argument with Timothy. She packed her bags and attempted to walk out, but Timothy chased after her. He grabbed her by the hair and dragged her back into the house, but Nikki's screams and struggles attracted the attention of their neighbors. Realizing he couldn't control the situation, Timothy let her go. Although Nikki was finally free from the violence, her ordeal was not over. After years of being in abusive and manipulative relationships, she was in a vulnerable state. However, Timothy had no intention of giving up. Instead of resorting to threats, he switched to romantic gestures to win her back. He would meet her after work, send her flowers, and send her messages filled with affection, begging for another chance to start over. Nikki had been resolute in her decision to leave her ex-boyfriend and had no intention of going back to him. However, in December of the same year, she discovered she was pregnant. Although this was not part of her plan, she never considered abortion the baby. She was aware that if her ex-boyfriend found out about the pregnancy, he would try to use it to manipulate her into getting back together. To avoid this, Nikki attempted to keep her pregnancy a secret, but it was eventually revealed to him through their mutual friends and acquaintances by January 2016. Once Timothy found out, he immediately contacted Nikki, claiming that their child should be raised in a complete, and urged her to reconsider their relationship and come back to him. Nikki, who had grown up without a father, knew firsthand how difficult it would be to raise a child solo, but she also understood that staying with someone manipulative, cruel, and uncaring would be detrimental to their child's well-being. Although she still had feelings for Timothy, she refused to get back together with him. However, she was willing to let him be a part of their child's life. On June 20, 2016, Nikki gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Callahan Ammer, and Timothy acknowledged paternity of the child, expressing his desire to co-parent. However, it soon became apparent that giving the baby his surname and registering him as the father was not the best decision. Timothy promises to be a responsible and caring parent, along with his pleas for they to reunite for the sake of their child, rang hollow. In reality, Timothy had no genuine interest in his son. He had hoped to use the child as a way to control his ex-girlfriend, Nikki, but she was no longer susceptible to his manipulation. As a result, Timothy quickly lost interest in the baby. Nikki, on the other hand, took a year-long maternity leave and dedicated herself fully to caring for her son. She didn't even consider starting new relationships, completely immersing herself in motherhood. Meanwhile, Timothy continued his carefree lifestyle, juggling numerous casual lovers and connections. In 2016, Timothy, a 36-year-old mentor and coach, started living with his 18-year-old girl student, Colin. He had been training Colin since she was 14, and over time, she had developed strong romantic feelings for him, despite their 18-year age gap. At first, they kept their relationship private, telling others that Colin was just a tenant in Timothy's home. However, it soon became apparent to those around them that a romantic relationship was developing between they. Timothy was happy with Colin, and friends observed that Colin was deeply committed to Timothy, often displaying a youthful eagerness to please him. In the summer of 2017, Nikki returned to work earlier than expected. As a single mother, she had no other choice. The child's father was not providing adequate support, and she was struggling financially. At the time, Nikki was a forensic expert at the Minneapolis Police Headquarters, where her work schedule was often unpredictable. Callahan attended daycare during the day, but when Nikki was held up at work or received an unexpected call, she would ask Timothy to watch her son. She allowed her current lover, Timothy, to take care of her child from a previous relationship for a couple of reasons. 1. She wanted the child to have a positive relationship with his father, who had recently promised to be more involved. 2. Since her ex-partner wasn't contributing financially, she hoped that by Timothy watching the child, he could save her money on childcare. However, the situation worked out differently than expected. Timothy did not enjoy spending time with the child. It was a burden to him, and he was unwilling to take on the responsibility. Thus, he shifted it along with all related troubles onto his young lover, Colin. In the end, Colin took a liking to the little boy and was happy to take care of him. But what happened next was surprising. Timothy turned the situation around, making Nikki feel responsible for caring for the child by saying that Nikki was irresponsible and trying to offload her parenting duties onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nikki started a new romantic relationship with Donovan Ford, a fellow police officer. Donovan was kind and caring towards Nikki and her son Callahan, and he was even willing to adopt the boy. For a while, everything seemed perfect. However, when Timothy, Nikki's ex, found out about the new relationship, he became enraged. Despite having no interest in rekindling things with Nikki and having little involvement in his son's life, Timothy was furious that Nikki had moved on and was happy. This sparked a desire to sabotage her new relationships and cause trouble. Timothy decided to use their son, Callahan, and Colin, who was naive and trusting, to further his own malicious goals. The Timothy consistently contacted social services to report concerns that Donovan was physically and emotionally abusing their son and that Nikki was failing to intervene. As a result, Child Protective Services frequently investigated the family. Although no evidence of abuse was ever found, Nikki and Donovan were repeatedly questioned. They was feeling unfairly targeted. They were aware of who was behind the accusations, but felt powerless to stop the cycle of investigations that continued for years. Meanwhile, Timothy continued to manipulate Colin, convincing her that Callahan was in grave danger, that Nikki and Donovan were cruel to him, and that they might one day harm him. Colin believed that Timothy genuinely cared for the boy, who had grown up before her eyes, and was willing to protect him. Timothy persistently intimidated and threatened his Nikki and Timothy, going so far as to file false police reports. When Donovan attempted to reason with him, Timothy refused to back down, continuing to make life unbearable for Nikki and Donovan. Timothy escalated the situation by taking his ex-girlfriend to court, seeking sole custody of their young son, Tim. Nikki was caught off guard and felt vulnerable, knowing her ex's history of dishonesty and manipulation. She believed that Timothy's true intention was not to care for their son, but to punish her for moving on and finding happiness with Donovan. Nikki decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his unstable behavior and the threat he posed to her. Although she was confident of winning custody of their child, she anticipated a long and arduous legal battle ahead, knowing Timothy would not give up easily. In the meantime, Timothy continued to wreak havoc on his ex-girlfriend's life, spinning elaborate lies. He even fabricated a story about Nikki attempting to harm him, claiming she had tried to hit him with her car. He alleged that he narrowly escaped by jumping out of the way, and that she had only run over his foot. However, when he took this false accusation to court, it quickly fell apart due to lack of evidence. In September 2022, the custody case went to trial. Timothy made false accusations against Nikki, claiming she was harming their child. Furthermore, Timothy attempted to manipulate their child, Callahan, into saying that his mother and Donovan were physically abusing him. He even offered the child treats in exchange for lying. However, Callahan refused to lie and instead revealed that his father was pressuring him to make false statements. The court considered Callahan's testimony and ultimately awarded sole custody to Nikki. Although Nikki was relieved, Timothy continued to fight the decision and filed an appeal. Initially, He was granted supervised visitation with Callahan once a week, with Nicky present. Later, the court allowed Timothy to spend time alone with Callahan without Nicky's supervision, which greatly distressed and frightened her. On April 19, 2022, a shocking incident occurred when Nicky went to the family center to pick up her son. As she parked and approached the entrance, a person wearing a black hoodie, mask, and clothing approached her. This individual, whose identity remains unknown, pulled out a gun and shot Nicky 4 times at close range before fleeing in a black pickup truck in an unknown direction. Nicky miraculously remained conscious after being shot, and she even managed to call emergency services. However, she was unable to communicate with the dispatcher because one of the bullets had damaged her vocal cords, leaving her only able to make gurgling sounds. A bystander, who had witnessed the shooting, happened to be passing by and rushed to Nicky's aid. The bystander had seen the shooter flee the scene in a vehicle and had made sure it was safe before approaching the victim. The bystander, who called 911, she told the dispatcher what had happened, gave them the address, and applied pressure to Nicky's wounds to stop the bleeding. This quick thinking likely saved Nicky's life. Nicky spent several days in a coma, fighting for her life. She had lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were damaged, but doctors were able to stabilize her condition. Nicky was extremely fortunate to have survived. Medical professionals were amazed that she had escaped death by mere millimeters. Now that Nicky was on the road to recovery, the focus shifted to identifying who had tried to kill her. Nicky, the victim, was certain that her ex-lover, Timothy, was the one who had shot her. She immediately reported this to the police as soon as she regained consciousness. Her friend Donovan also told the police that Nicky had no other enemies besides Timothy. However, during the investigation, Timothy had a solid alibi. He was at the family center with his son at the time of the shooting, which was confirmed by the staff and security footage. Nicky was certain that Timothy was behind the attempt on her life. The investigation uncovered some key evidence at the scene, for shell casings and a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup truck with no license plates that was caught on camera running a red light at a nearby intersection. Significantly, this vehicle matched the description given by a witness who had potentially saved Nicky's life. As a result, authorities decided to investigate the vehicles owned by Timothy. During a further interrogation, Timothy revealed that he owned a Chevrolet Traverse SUV and a Dodge Challenger, but he denied ever owning a pickup truck. The investigation revealed that the man was dishonest, and a black Dodge Ram matching the shooter's vehicle was registered in his name. Timothy was arrested for further questioning once the truth came to light. When shown the surveillance footage, he acknowledged owning a similar vehicle but claimed it was rarely used and mostly remained stationary. Timothy also mentioned that his pickup had distinctive stickers on the doors and hood. This was confirmed, but the stickers appeared to have been recently applied. Despite this, the evidence was circumstantial, and law enforcement still needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully close the case. An investigation revealed that Timothy's vehicle had a satellite navigation system, allowing authorities to track its route on the day in question. The car was parked at the back entrance of a Tando school on the evening of April 18th, remaining there overnight and most of the next day. Review of road cameras showed that the vehicle arrived at the school with license plates, but left without them the following evening. Footage also captured a person of short stature and slight build, with a feminine silhouette, operating the vehicle that day. As a result, police decided to detain and question Colin Larson, Timothy's live-in girlfriend, in connection with the events. A search was conducted at their home, but the weapon used in the crime was not found. However, authorities discovered ammunition with the same caliber as the crime scene. She, fearful and intimidated, quickly began to confess, revealing that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. In contrast, Colin, still under Timothy's influence, believed that his actions were justified and that he was trying to protect the child from an abusive mother. Unbeknownst to Colin, Timothy had been manipulating her for years, controlling what she thought and felt, leading her to believe that the child was being mistreated and that Timothy's actions were motivated by a desire to protect him. The trial of the conspirators took place in November of the same year. During the trial, Colin admitted that her lover had given her the gun used in the assassination attempt and had taken it back afterwards, but she claimed not to know what he did with it. The prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, a fact that the defense lawyers highlighted. However, Colin's confession proved to be the decisive factor, as she still struggled to accept that her lover had deceived her and genuinely believed they were committing a just act. The court also took into account the victim's testimony, which described Timothy's character and his history of manipulating the women who loved him. As a result, 42-year-old Timothy Amma was found guilty of orchestrating a first-degree attempted murder, as well as inciting and aiding the crime. He received the maximum sentence of 18 years in prison. Colin Larson, who carried out the attack, was sentenced to 16 years in prison. 1 year after the attempted assassination, Nikki made a full physical and emotional recovery. She and Donovan officially formalized their relationship, and he proved to be an excellent father figure for Callahan. Nikki and Donovan, now a married couple, are expecting their first child together, and the bystander who saved Nikki's life will be the child's godmother. In a related development, Timothy, if he behaves well, will be eligible for parole in 2035. However, as a condition of his parole, he will be required to stay at least 100 meters away from his son, former lover, and her family members, and he will be prohibited from attempting to contact them in any way. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Neil Entwistle. Neil Entwistle was born on September 18, 1978, in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, England, to Clifford and Yvonne Entwistle. He grew up in a humble home with his younger brother, Russell. His father worked as a coal miner before becoming a labor counselor, while his mother worked as a cook in a school cafeteria. After finishing high school, Neil Entwistle enrolled in the University of York, where he studied electronic engineering and business management. During this time, Entwistle met an American student named Rachel Souza who was attending York as a study abroad student. Rachel was originally from the Kingston area in Massachusetts, had attended Silver Lake Region High School before going to Holy Cross College in Worcester. While studying abroad in York for a year, she met Neil Entwistle on the rowing team. Neil Entwistle was withdrawn, shy, and indecisive, rarely interacting with others. Rachel, on the other hand, exuded confidence, was cheerful, outgoing, and well-liked. Her American roots brought an undeniable charm to her personality, and Rachel was well received by the other members of the rowing team. Over time, Neil Entwistle and Rachel found themselves drawn to each other, eventually spending more and more time together. Benjamin Pryor, a close friend of Neil Entwistle and Rachel's since college, said the couple were very understanding, affectionate and caring towards each other. While Neil Entwistle worked at a defense and security technology company based in Malvern, Worcestershire, Rachel pursued a career in education after completing her studies in 2002. Rachel took up a teaching role in English, drama and theater studies at St. Augustine's Catholic High School in Redditch, nurturing young minds through the arts. In a post on Friends Reunited in June 2003, Neil Entwistle happily shared about his upcoming marriage to Rachel. They met through rowing, although he expressed dissatisfaction with life south of the border in Birmingham. He was happy with his upcoming marriage. In August 2003, Neil Entwistle and Rachel got married in 2 ceremonies, one in Plymouth, UK, and the other in Massachusetts, USA. After the US ceremony, they had a reception in the UK in November of the same year. Neil Entwistle shared the early days of their married life on a family website, including their Christmas 2004 trip to the Mediterranean. In April 2005, their daughter, Lillian Rose, was born. Neil Entwistle and Rachel decided to move to the United States. They initially lived with Rachel's mother and stepfather in Carver, Massachusetts, until they purchased their own home in Hopkinton on January 12, 2006. Their new home was located on a quiet cul-de-sac with only 8 neighbors, creating a peaceful setting close to a major city. Despite Neil Entwistle's efforts to find work as a computer programmer and IT specialist, he encountered difficulties in finding work, leading to financial stress and mounting debt. To ease the financial burden, Neil Entwistle turned to selling PC parts on eBay. However, his business was affected by customer complaints about undelivered orders, forcing eBay to investigate fraud. An investigation into Neil Entwistle's eBay activities uncovered that he was using multiple accounts under different names. Further investigation revealed that Neil Entwistle was involved in running a website called millimaker.co.uk. This website promoted a get-rich-quick scheme that promised to help people in the adult entertainment industry make a guaranteed $6,000 per month within 6 months. The website also claimed to offer 24/7 assistance. However, these claims ultimately led to the website being shut down. Neil Entwistle used online platforms to find sexual partners. He visited several websites to pursue relationships looking for sexual partners. On Adult Friend Finder, Neil Entwistle created a profile and emailed several women expressing his interest in meeting sexual partners. An investigation found incriminating evidence on Neil Entwistle's laptop. In his profile, Neil Entwistle stated that he was interested in meeting American women of different ages. Neil Entwistle also mentioned that he wanted to confirm whether American women were better in bed than women from other countries. Neil Entwistle's profile indicated that he was looking for a specific type of casual relationship and was open to meeting people with similar interests. Testimony at the trial revealed Neil Entwistle had continued his interest in escort services up to January 18, 2006. Online searches he conducted on Google included Blonde Bay Escort Service, Sex Escort Services Westborough, and Escort in Worcester. In their defense, Neil Entwistle's lawyers claimed that his wife, Rachel, was dissatisfied with their sex life. However, when reviewing Neil Entwistle's internet search history, it is revealed that Neil Entwistle had much darker motives than seeking out prostitutes and seeking relationships with other women. During this time, Neil Entwistle visited his father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo, in Carver, Massachusetts. Joe Matarazzo, a member of the Old Colony Sporting Club, had previously taught Neil Entwistle how to shoot. Neil Entwistle also had a .22 caliber revolver with Joe Matarazzo's family. However, on this occasion, Neil Entwistle planned to steal a gun from Joe Matarazzo's family. Neil Entwistle went to his in-laws' home, found a hidden gun, and took it back to his house in Hopkinton. Once home, he secretly hid the firearm, waiting for the right moment to carry out a violent act against his family. On January 20, 2006, Neil Entwistle entered the master bedroom of his home, where his wife, Rachel, and their 9-month-old daughter, Lillian, were sleeping in their new bed. Neil Entwistle shot Rachel in the head and then shot Lillian, who was lying next to her. The bullet passed through Lillian's body and also hit Rachel in the left chest. Later that day, Neil Entwistle returned to Carver with the uncleaned weapon. He would later claim that he had gone shopping at Staples on that Friday and discovered his family dead when he got home. After leaving Carver, Neil Entwistle drove to Boston's Logan Airport on the evening of January 20, 2006. At the airport, he made 2 successful ATM withdrawals totaling $800, but 3 additional attempts to withdraw $420 were declined. The next day, January 21, 2006, Neil Entwistle bought a one-way ticket to London without checking any luggage. He boarded a British Airways flight that departed Boston at 8:15 p.m. that evening. Unbeknownst to Neil Entwistle, several neighbors he had invited for dinner, including Joanna Gatley and her sister Maureen, arrived at his home around 7 p.m. to find it locked with the lights on inside. Concerned for Rachel's safety, neighbors attempted to contact her mother, but were unable to reach her. They then called 911 at around 8:30. Police arrived at Neil Entwistle's home to search for clues about the missing family. Upon entering, Sergeant Michael Sutton observed the bedroom, noticing a large unmade bed, but nothing unusual. After completing their search, the police locked the house and left. However, Joanna Gatley and Moran were still worried and decided to spend the night in the car outside the house, hoping that Rachel's family would return. To cope with the cold weather, they made several trips to the gas station restroom. The following Sunday morning, Joanna Gatley and Moran gained entry to the house using the garage door code they had obtained from a next-door neighbor the night before. Inside, Joanna Gatley and Moran discovered dishes and leftover food in the kitchen, indicating that the family had just finished eating. The bathtub was still full of water, indicating that the couple had bathed their infant daughter. They proceeded to the master bedroom, then to Lillian's bathroom, where classical music was playing, and finally checked the living room. Rachel's mother and stepfather then arrived at Rachel's house, and together they searched around the house. After assessing the situation, they decided to report the family missing to the Hopkinton Police Department. The police arrived at Rachel's house. Sergeant Sutton entered the basement and detected a foul odor. He followed the stench into the house to the master bedroom, where he found the bodies of Rachel and her infant child, Lillian. The mother's body was lying on a bed, covered in clothes. Rachel had her arms spread across Lillian's chest, both of them wearing pajamas. Autopsy results showed that Rachel died from a gunshot wound to the head, while Lillian was shot in the torso. DNA evidence was also found on the barrel of the gun and on the butt of the gun, belonging to Neil Entwistle. About 36 hours after returning to England, Neil Entwistle visited his parents, Cliff and Yvonne. He told them that he had been driving around and had spent the previous night in a hotel. During this visit, Neil Entwistle revealed to his parents that he had discovered the bodies of his wife and daughter. On January 23, 2006, Neil Entwistle had a 2-hour telephone conversation with Hopkinton Police, which was recorded. On January 26, 2006, U.S. law enforcement officials traveled to the UK to interview Neil Entwistle. The next day, after consulting with a lawyer at the U.S. Embassy in London, Neil Entwistle chose not to cooperate with the American detectives. Meanwhile, Rachel and her daughter Lillian were buried in Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts, under the surname Souza, sharing a single grave, with around 500 people attending the funeral to pay their respects. However, Neil Entwistle was absent from the ceremony, and Neil Entwistle's name was not mentioned in the proceedings or inscribed on the headstone. Despite this, Neil Entwistle sent a bouquet of flowers, consisting of an orange rose and a white lily, with a note that read, "My orange roses and lilies forever, signed Sakoko." After returning to the UK, Neil Entwistle resumed his normal life in February 2006. However, the media continued to gather outside his parents' home in Worksop. Neil Entwistle went to Notting Hill for dinner with his old crew from York University, followed by a trip to the cinema. Just a week after the funeral, on February 8, 2006, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office issued an arrest warrant for Neil Entwistle. The following day, February 9, 2006, Neil Entwistle was arrested by police at Royal Oak Station as he was about to board a train. Neil Entwistle was returned to the United States on February 15 and appeared in court, where he was denied bail and held at the Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On March 28, 2006, Neil Entwistle was formally charged with murder and illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. Neil Entwistle pleaded not guilty despite the charges against him. Almost a year after the incident, in December 2006, authorities at Middlesex County Jail found letters Neil Entwistle had written to his parents and lawyers. These letters showed that Neil Entwistle was depressed and might be thinking about killing himself. As a result, he was moved to Bridgewater Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being sent back to Middlesex County. Forensic psychiatrist Christopher Cordes believed that Neil Entwistle's behavior was caused by Asperger's syndrome, a view that was shared by Dr. David Holmes. After several delays, the process of choosing jurors for Neil Entwistle's trial at Middlesex Superior Court began in June 2008. The trial for the double murder of Neil Entwistle's wife and daughter began on June 2, 2008, in Massachusetts. Elliot Weinstein led the defense team for Neil Entwistle. During the trial, Elliot attempted to object to the prosecution's plan to introduce DNA evidence, but was unsuccessful. Elliot also attempted to suppress other evidence found in the family home, arguing that it was taken without a warrant, but this effort was also unsuccessful. Neil Entwistle chose not to call any witnesses or testify during the trial. Notably, Neil Entwistle showed little emotion throughout the proceedings. On June 25, 2008, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Neil Entwistle of 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition. As a result, Neil Entwistle was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite the severe sentence, Neil Entwistle appeared calm as he left the courtroom. Neil Entwistle was incarcerated at the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. In August 2008, he became the victim of a hoax when he shaved his head to seek protection from a white supremacist prison gang. However, instead of receiving protection, the gang threatened Neil Entwistle's life. After this incident, Neil Entwistle was placed in protective custody. He was then transferred to the Old Colony Correctional Center, a prison located in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, in December. The tragic death of Rachel and her infant daughter has left a lasting legacy of grief for the family and those who loved them. In the face of this tragic loss, the community has come together to support and comfort the grieving family. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Peter Tobin. Peter Britton Tobin was born on August 27, 1946, in Johnstone, Scotland. He was the youngest of 8 children born to Marjorie and Daniel Tobin. From an early age, Peter displayed an impulsive personality, prompting his parents to send him to boarding school in 1953 when he was only 7 years old. However, this did not work, and he was sent to a reformatory. After completing his time there, he moved to Brighton, England. There, Peter began a relationship with Margaret Mount, a young typist who was attracted to his personality. They married in August 1969, but soon, Peter's ruthless, controlling, and abusive personality manifested itself. Not only that, Peter also became involved in criminal activities. A year later, he was convicted and imprisoned in England for theft and counterfeiting. Margaret decided to divorce him in 1973. Peter then married Sylvia Jeffrey, a 30-year-old local nurse, who was also attracted to his charm. That year, they had their first son, Ian, and a year later, a daughter, Claire, who unfortunately died shortly after birth. Sylvia was devastated by the loss of her child, became a victim of Peter's abuse, and decided to leave in 1976, taking their young son with her. Years later, when he was in his 40s, Peter was ready for a new romantic relationship. This time, he chose Kathy Wilson, a sensitive, naive, and impressionable 16-year-old girl. This made it easy for Peter to start a relationship with Kathy. The two moved in together, and soon after, their son, Daniel, was born. They married in 1989 and moved to Scotland. This was a difficult time for Kathy. Her husband was controlling, preventing her from going out and becoming increasingly violent. Eventually, Kathy bravely decided to run away with her son in the late 1990s. Kathy's departure brought out the worst in Peter. After Kathy left, Peter met a gentle girl named Vicky Hamilton. Vicky was born in Scotland in 1976 and was the second child of Michael and Janet Hamilton. She had 3 siblings, Sharon, Lee, and Lindsay. However, arguments arose between Peter and Vicky and they quickly divorced. Vicky, Lee, and Lindsay lived with their mother and moved to South London. Sharon still lives in Bath, but this did not prevent Vicky and Sharon from maintaining the same close relationship as before. The evening of February 10th was cold and snowy. On a hangout with Sharon, Vicky checked her fare and went over the bus route with Sharon. They hugged goodbye. At the bus stop, while eating a bag of chips, Vicky met Peter. He pulled Vicky into his car, raped her, and then killed her. When Vicky failed to visit her mother's house, and there was no news of her, her family began to search for her. They reported her disappearance to the police. As the police investigated the case, Vicky's image became prominent across Scotland, and the search for her became one of the largest in the country's history. The runaway theory was reinforced on February 21, 1991, when Vicky's purse was found near the main bus station in Edinburgh. It was, in fact, a false clue planted by Peter to throw investigators off track. The attempt was successful, sending the investigation off track. Detectives spent 2 months searching London unsuccessfully. It was then revealed that Vicky's mother had died. Over the next 10 years, Vicky's family and townspeople continued to pursue the case, but with more than 7,000 names on file, nearly 4,000 statements taken, some 500 documents and 380 potential physical evidence, all to no avail. The case was eventually dropped. The next young woman to have Peter's misfortune was Dinah McNichol, an Essex native with a brother and 3 sisters. Her father was a jazz musician and her mother had died in a car accident many years earlier. At 18, Dinah was a kind, cheerful girl and a great friend. She had just graduated from high school and had high hopes for the future. She was torn between taking a year off to travel or going to college, but she was undecided. On the first weekend of August 1991, Dinah attended a music festival in Hampshire. There, she met a boy named David Tremlett. They quickly fell in love. On Sunday, August 4th, they spent the night together in a tent. The next day, Dinah helped him take down the tent and they agreed to each hitchhike home. As they were both tired, Peter showed up and offered to give them a ride. David got out of the car first, and Dinah saved Peter's number before parting ways. Alone with the strange driver, the girl was about to face a real nightmare. On Monday, August 5, 1991, he did the same to her as he had done to Vicky. Dinah's scarf became a crime tool. After the crime, Peter withdrew money from Dinah's account at ATMs in Hampshire and Sussex. When Dinah's family saw the withdrawals from her account, they immediately suspected something was wrong. They knew she had carefully saved every penny and planned to use it for travel or education. As the days passed, the family lived in fear and uncertainty, which was the worst thing. Although no one said it, everyone believed that something terrible had happened. If Dinah were still alive, she would have returned home or called to explain her absence. As for Peter, he left Margate without saying goodbye or explaining anything. In 1993, he settled in Hampshire, renting a flat in Leek Park, saying he wanted to be closer to his son. On August 4, 1993, 2 14-year-old girls went to visit Dinah but did not see her. So they asked the neighbors if anyone had seen Dinah, which led to them knocking on Peter's door. Peter invited the 2 girls into his house, ostensibly to wait for Dinah. They saw his friendly 5-year-old son and agreed without suspicion. While the child was asleep, Peter began to torment the 2 girls. He threatened them with a knife and forced them to drink alcohol, then beat and raped them. One of the girls was seriously injured. Fortunately, the child woke up in time and saved them from the same terrible fate as the two previous victims. Peter wanted to hide the truth from his son, so he decided to leave the apartment with the child. Before leaving at around 2 a.m., he turned on the gas stove to complete his monstrous plan. However, the two girls were lucky to wake up and escape. They went to the police and reported everything that had happened. After that, Peter returned the child to his mother and joined a sect called the Jesus Fellowship under a false name. But the media published his photo, provided by the police, and his face became widely known. With the help of BBC Crime Watch, Peter was finally arrested after 40 days on the run in Brighton. Peter appeared in court on May 18, 1994 and pleaded guilty to sexual assault and indecent assault on two young girls. As a result, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, Peter was released in 2014 at the age of 58 without serving the full sentence. After his release, Peter returned to Scotland with the aim of hiding in the same area to avoid being identified as a sex offender. He evaded capture for a long time until 2006. During this time, Peter used a false name and posed as a homeless person. He sought refuge at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Glasgow. Under the name Peter McLaughlin, Peter approached a charity couple from the church group, Dennis and Katie Curran. Katie still felt uneasy about Peter despite his frail appearance. On the other hand, having been raised Catholic, Peter felt comfortable in the church. He begged there, which helped him gain sympathy from the parishioners. This gave Peter the freedom to move around unnoticed and provided him with an ideal hiding place. Here, Peter met Angelika Kluck, a 23-year-old girl from Poland. She came to Scotland in the summer of 2006 to work and pay for her language lessons. Angelika was living in the rectory of St. Patrick's Church and doing cleaning work. Peter took an immediate liking to Angelika and convinced her to help him with various tasks. On Sunday, September 24, 2006, Angelika helped Peter paint a shed. Some parishioners saw them together. But unexpectedly, Peter attacked Angelika at the back of the chapel. Leica Brown, 47, and her husband, Andrew, 46, were at home when they heard a woman screaming through an open window. Leica described the scream as a short, loud sound, like someone being forcibly restrained. The scream made her nervous and she got up from her chair, but when she got to the window, she couldn't see anything. Hours passed and the parishioners noticed that Angelika was no longer there. That was when Dennis and Katie quickly reported the unusual disappearance to the police. The police immediately began investigating and interviewed every member of the community. During these interviews, it was discovered that the last person anyone saw with Angelika was Peter, albeit under the guise of a homeless. He eventually became the prime suspect and the police came to question him, but found no evidence. The investigation continued. Peter knew that it was only a matter of time before they found the body and traced it back to him, so he fled to London. By this time, Detective David Swindle had joined the investigation and began to suspect that this might not just be a disappearance. Everything they found, as well as the testimonies they gathered, made him think that Angelika was unlikely to be found alive. Finally, on September 29, 2006, authorities discovered the body in the chapel. This news shocked British society, especially because of the location chosen by the perpetrator to hide the body. Looking at the injuries sustained by the girl, Detective David suspected that the perpetrator was not acting for the first time. However, there was more news to come. The DNA found at the crime scene and on the victim's body matched the data in the United Kingdom's National Criminal Intelligence Database. That's when they learned that the man they were looking for was Peter Tobin, whose fingerprints were also found at the crime scene. The first step for the authorities was to publish his photograph in the media. His image was also sent nationwide for distribution and the Scottish police contacted the Metropolitan Police, initiating a search throughout the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, Peter, who was in London, tried to hide in a place where he believed he wouldn't be sought. He went to a hospital, pretending to have heart problems, claiming to have chest pain and weakness on the left side of his body. He identified himself as a plumber and called himself James Kelly. He was examined by Dr. Nick Lasso, who conducted several tests. However, something in his demeanor and behavior made the doctor uncomfortable. Initially, he avoided eye contact, which was unusual for a patient. Then, when the tests didn't reveal any physical reasons for the pain he claimed to be experiencing, the doctor became suspicious. His suspicions were confirmed by a nurse who recognized Peter from a photograph circulating in the media. As a result, both the nurse and the doctor contacted the police. This phone call changed the entire dynamic of the investigation. On September 30th, police officer Alan Murray was dispatched to the hospital in London. Peter was taken to a room and Alan went to talk to him. He was immediately arrested. Although initially, he was charged only with a violation of the sex offender registry, this thing allowed the officers to buy time to prepare a criminal case against him. Evidence gathered by the police team led by Detective David led to Peter's trial for the crimes committed against Angelica in late March 2007. Despite all the evidence against him, Peter denied committing any violent acts against the young woman. However, in an attempt to shift blame for the rape, he claimed that they engaged in consensual sexual activity. Peter also denied providing false information to the police and hospital staff. After 6 weeks of legal proceedings, his lies and manipulations proved futile as he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Detective David and his team suspected that there were more mysteries to Peter's story. During the trial, the detectives further investigated Peter's life, gathered more evidence and built a profile with the cooperation of various law enforcement agencies. To avoid affecting the case involving Angelica, they chose to carry out their work discreetly and carefully. The joint police investigation was called Anagram. Investigators identified links between the disappearances and locations that Peter had visited. The investigation revealed 2 exact links, one in Bathgate and one in Margate. A search was then carried out at Peter's old house on the coast and they found a knife with traces of DNA hidden in the attic. However, no other findings were made at the location. Investigators then visited the house where he lived in Margate and established that he was a dangerous serial offender. A search of the house revealed a secret grave in the garden that he had created for his son. Investigators dug up a sand pit in the garden and found the body of a woman. Further searches at the same location uncovered another body. A woman's handbag was found at the crime scene and was collected for DNA analysis. As well as identifying the 2 victims, the handbag was also analyzed. Although the handbag clearly contained DNA, there was no match in the National DNA Database. However, on June 1, 2007, investigators found a DNA match to Peter's fingerprints. This was a vital lead and they decided to pursue this line of investigation. On November 14, 2007, the authorities confirmed that one of the bodies was that of Vicky Hamilton, who had gone missing at the age of 15. Her family had waited 16 years for any information about her. They later identified the second body as that of 18-year-old Dinah McNichol, who was hitchhiking home after attending a concert. On September 1, 2008, the Crown Prosecution Service charged Peter with Vicky's murder, leading to his trial. When Vicky's father, Michael, saw Peter, he was restrained by the police, as at that point he just wanted Peter to know that he was there to defend his daughter's honor and remember her. Peter faced sentencing after a month of trial on December 2, 2008, when he was convicted of Vicky's murder and sentenced to life in prison. A year later, in December 2009, Dinah's trial took place. On December 16, due to the defense's failure to provide evidence to exonerate his client, the jury found Peter guilty of Dinah's murder. As a result, he was given an additional life sentence. 5 months before his trial, a report on November 22, 2007, stated that Peter Tobin had been attacked by fellow inmates in prison, but he only suffered minor injuries. During the investigation, Peter Tobin also confessed to a total of 11 murders. Peter died in hospital on October 8, 2022. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Valerie Tiemann. Valerie Joy Tiemann was born on December 31, 1981, in Salem, Virginia, to parents Sarah Jean Sampson Tiemann and Jean Allen Harmon. She spent her childhood in Greenville, South Carolina, and graduated from Hampton Park Christian School in 2000. Valerie pursued her passion for beauty by earning a degree in cosmetology from Bob Jones University. Valerie was a bright and friendly person, known for her warm smile and outgoing personality. She had a flair for drama and speech, and was also musically inclined, playing the piano and flute. With her cosmetology skills, Valerie worked in various salons, spas, and pageants. In her personal life, Valerie was in a relationship with Matt Gotcha, whom she met through a mutual friend when she was 22 years old. Although they had distinct personalities, Valerie being outgoing and cheerful, while Matt was more reserved, their differences did not create problems in their relationship. Valerie and Matt got married in 2004 and initially lived happily together in Matt's small house. However, over time, Valerie's parents noticed a change in her behavior. Matt became controlling, restricting Valerie's access to their finances and forcing her to open a separate bank account to have some independence. As time went on, Matt's behavior worsened, and he began to blame Valerie for all their problems. Valerie endured years of emotional pain, but eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. After 10 years of marriage, Valerie and Matt divorced in 2014. Valerie found solace with Luke Tiemann, a reliable and loving man who had served in the army for 10 years, including tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Luke helped Valerie overcome her past traumas, and her relatives noticed a marked improvement in her mood. She began to smile and laugh again, returning to her cheerful self. On June 6, 2014, Luke and Valerie got married, starting a new chapter in their lives together. They settled into Luke's parents' house in Fairfield, Maine, while Valerie's parents lived in South Carolina. Luke and Valerie went back to Maine after visiting her family in South Carolina in August 2016. A week after returning to Maine, Luke started chatting with another woman on Facebook. On August 24, 2016, several people saw Luke with this new woman, and that night, they had intimate relations. It appears Valerie found out about Luke's affair. That same night, Valerie tried calling Luke 31 times within 5 hours. The next day, on August 25, 2016, a mutual friend told Valerie that Luke was pursuing other women and claiming they were separated. Valerie sent several messages to this friend, expressing her heartbreak but trusting that God had a plan and that Luke would never find a better partner than her. On August 26, 2016, he moved in with she he was having an affair with and told her that Valerie had left him for another man. Valerie, who normally called her parents in South Carolina every week, suddenly stopped responding to their calls and text messages for over a week. Her parents reached out to her boyfriend Luke to ask about her well-being. Luke responded a day later, saying that they were fine and that he loved her. However, 13 days passed and Valerie's parents still couldn't get in touch with Valerie, so they decided to call Luke's father for information. He told them that Valerie had been missing for about 2 weeks and asked what he should do with her belongings. Valeria's father spoke with Luke Tiemann, asking why he hadn't reported her missing. Luke claimed Valeria left him for another man and would tell her parents herself. However, her parents were skeptical, as this behavior was uncharacteristic of Valeria, and they believed she would have reached out to them. On September 9, 2016, Valeria's father filed a missing persons report with the Fairfield Police Department. Detectives investigated by visiting Luke's parents' home, where Valerie lived. They spoke with Luke's mother, Laurel T. Mann, who claimed no knowledge of their whereabouts. 2 weeks after Valerie's disappearance, Laurel packed up Valerie's belongings in garbage bags, showing apparent indifference to her well-being. The police were searching for Luke T. Mann to ask him some questions about Valerie's disappearance, but they couldn't find him. When they finally spoke to him 5 days later, he claimed that he had last seen Valerie 2 weeks prior at a local Walmart. According to Luke, Valerie had stayed in the car while he went shopping, but when he returned, she was gone. Luke said he tried to contact Valerie by phone and text, but she didn't respond. He assumed she had left him for another man, whom he didn't know by name. Luke claimed their marriage was nearing its end and that Valerie had mentioned someone else during a conversation. However, Valerie's family was unaware of anyone other than Luke in her life, casting doubt on his claims. Police sought public help through the media, sharing a photo of Valerie and asking for sightings. Detectives found the situation suspicious, including discarded belongings and Luke T. Mann's lack of effort to find his wife, raising questions about his involvement. To verify Luke's story, investigators reviewed Walmart surveillance footage from the day Valerie vanished. However, after examining the CCTV recordings, they found no evidence of Luke, his truck, or Valerie. This discovery indicated Luke had lied, suggesting he was hiding something. Luke's infidelity with Billy Joe was no secret. He admitted to cheating on Valerie, hoping to move on. Billy Joe claimed to know nothing about Valerie's disappearance, thinking Luke was divorced from her. But a local resident approached the police with a disturbing find that Valerie's driver's license in a parking lot near Billy Joe's home. Suspicion grew due to the proximity of the license to Billy Joe's home. It seemed unlikely Valerie would abandon her belongings and ID if she had run off with someone. 10 days after her father's report, Luke repeated his story to News Center Maine, claiming he didn't find Valerie at Walmart. However, Walmart's CCTV footage contradicted his alibi. On September 20, 2016, detectives obtained a search warrant for Luke's parents' property in Fairfield, where Valerie last lived. Police dogs trained to detect human remains joined the search. Just 5 minutes in, a dog found something suspicious in the woods. Officers dug up a woman's body wrapped in a blanket, along with some unusual items. The investigation found several items near Valerie's body: a bag of potato chips, perfume, sweet tarts, a flannel shirt, and a mason jar with a handwritten note. A wedding ring was discovered later, hidden among the jar's contents of dirt, stems, and twigs. Sergeant Scott Bryant, who found the ring, noted it was larger than his own wedding ring. The handwritten note, which was worn and dirty, stated that it was for his one and only Joy, Valerie Flower Forever, and that he loved Valerie Joy Tierman. It continued by expressing that she should rest in peace with his heart and Jesus, and that he couldn't wait to see her again. The note was signed Lie Bear, a nickname Luke later explained to the police was used by him in several other notes found in Valerie's purse. These items, including the note and the other evidence, linked Luke to Valerie's death. The body was taken to the forensic medical examiner's office for an autopsy and identification. Unfortunately for Valeria's parent, they had to face the devastating news that the body found behind their house was indeed their daughter Valerie. Not only did Valerie and Luke live in the house, but also Luke's parents and his younger brother, Sam. Detectives searched the property and found landscaping tools belonging to Sam in the barn, which had been used to dig the grave site. A device used to consume an illegal substance was also found in the barn. Investigations revealed Sam's use of a banned substance, previously mentioned by Valerie. Police now suspect Sam's involvement in Valerie's death. A .45 caliber handgun, purchased by Luke in 2015, was found in his parents' bedroom. Luke's parents claimed ignorance, but this is hard to believe. Upon further searches by investigators around the same time of Valerie's burial site discovery, Luke was located alongside his new girlfriend, Billie Joe. Luke T-Man was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. He told investigators that his wife, Valerie, had died almost a month ago, on August 25th, from an overdose of illegal substances. However, Luke claimed that he had not informed Valerie's parents about her death because he did not want them to know that she was using illegal substances. According to Luke, he did not call 911 after Valerie's death because he knew it would be pointless, as she was already dead. Instead, he left her body in bed until evening, when it got dark outside. He then wrapped her in a blanket, left a note, and took her to the woods behind their house, where he and his brother, Sam, dug a hole and buried her. Luke claimed that Valerie had not suffered any physical injuries before her death. However, the autopsy results revealed that Luke was lying. No traces of banned substances were found in Valerie's blood, only prescription drugs. Moreover, the autopsy showed that Valerie's cause of death was 2 bullet wounds, one to the head and one to the neck. The ballistics examination revealed that the bullets were fired from a .45 caliber handgun, which matched the gun found in Luke's parents' bedroom during his search. Luke admitted to buying the gun about a year ago, but claimed that he had purchased it for his father. Luke T-Man was accused of killing his 34-year-old wife, Valerie T-Man. During the investigation, the police found no evidence to suggest that his parents or younger brother were involved in the crime. However, Luke claimed that his brother Sam helped him bury Valerie's body. The police disputed this, stating that Sam was not at home at the time of the incident. It remains unclear whether Luke's parents knew about or were involved in Valerie's death, but it is peculiar that they didn't hear the gunshots. The trial against Luke began on April 2, 2018, in Somerset County Superior Court in Skowhegan, Maine. Luke pleaded not guilty, claiming that someone had framed him. He argued that he wouldn't have left incriminating evidence like an engagement ring and a note near the body. However, forensic examinations linked all the items found with Valerie's body to Luke T-Man. A computer forensics expert testified that Valerie's phone was last used on August 25, 2016, the day police believe she died. The detective explained how phone records help investigators track a person's location. Records showed Valerie called Luke 31 times on the day he was with his new girlfriend. Luke only answered the last call, which lasted 13 minutes. Police believe he was home by the time the call ended the next morning. During the trial, Luke's brother Sam testified against him, prompting the defense to question the phone records. Luke initially told police that Sam helped him bury Valerie's body, but Sam denied this in court. Sam had an alibi, working 2 hours away, which his work log supported. Prosecution witnesses painted a picture of the private life of Luke and Valerie. It was revealed that Luke had told police that his PTSD could trigger rages that he would later forget. Court testimony showed that Luke and Valerie regularly used multiple types of illegal substances, and that Luke had claimed he was getting divorced around the time of Valerie's disappearance. The ex-girlfriend of Sam's brother testified about seeing Luke and Valerie use various substances together, despite the image they projected of having a healthy relationship. Members of the evidence response team testified about their findings at the T-Man's home. Luke's defense team quickly objected to some items, including gardening tools found in a shed near the property and a .45 caliber handgun obtained from one of the rooms in the home. Stephen Smith, T-Man's defense attorney, argued that the state assumed the gun and ammo were used by T-Man because they were found in the home. However, he pointed out that they never verified who the items actually belonged to, suggesting that someone else in the house may have had use to them. On the 5th day of the trial, T-Man admitted to changing his story multiple times, stating that he told investigators several different versions to protect his parents. He claimed that the detectives forced him to give false testimony and that he had no motive to take his wife's life. Furthermore, he stated that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the crime scene. Prosecutors presented a strong clue against Luke T-Man, stating that he was the only person who could have harmed Valerie and that all the evidence pointed to his guilt. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before delivering a guilty verdict on May 11, 2018. At the sentencing hearing, Valerie's mother expressed her outrage and grief, stating that T-Man's denial of the crime was appalling and that he deserved a life sentence in prison. T-Man's mother, on the other hand, pleaded with the court to consider her son's entire life and to balance justice with mercy. T-Man became emotional as his parents begged the judge for leniency. His mother, Laurel, explained that her son had changed after serving 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and that she was not using his post-traumatic stress disorder as an excuse, but rather seeking understanding. Ultimately, T-Man was sentenced to 55 years in prison, which was less than the life sentence that Valerie's parents had hoped for. T-Man appealed the decision, but it was unsuccessful. While in prison, he changed his testimony again, but this did not help his case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of John Thomas McGuire. Life in an orphanage is difficult and unpredictable. You have no personal space, no control over your time, and if you're not able to stand up for yourself, you're likely to be bullied by the older kids. Amanda and Anna Marie McClure, however, were a little more fortunate because they had each other. With 2 of them, they were more able to defend themselves. The sisters preferred to keep to themselves and didn't try to make friends with anyone else. They were hopeful that their stay in the orphanage would be short-lived. They believed that their mother would soon find out that their father, Larry McClure, was in prison and that she would come to take them away. It was impossible to keep their father's imprisonment a secret. The news was all over TV and in the newspapers for a long time. As time passed, days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. Unfortunately, it became clear that they might not be returning home anytime soon. One day, the sisters intervened to protect a new girl, Meredith, from being bullied. Meredith had a difficult past, having lived with a mother who was addicted to drugs. She was very thin, scared, and would jump at the slightest noise. After her mother died of an overdose, Meredith was too afraid to call for help and ended up in the orphanage. Amanda and Anna Marie kept the reason for their presence a secret, brushing it off when Meredith asked about it with a fabricated story about a policeman father who died in the line of duty. However, the truth eventually emerged that their father was not a deceased police officer, but a living criminal serving time in prison for violent sexual crimes against a young girl. This revelation made their lives a living hell. Luckily, the sisters soon got a second chance when 2 separate families adopted them almost simultaneously, allowing them to start anew. Unfortunately, this meant they would be separated and lose touch with each other. There is no information available about the sisters' experiences in their foster homes. What is known is that Amanda, 29 at the time, met her future husband, John McGuire, now 38. Her adoptive parents had worried that Amanda would remain single forever, given her lack of biological family and the emotional trauma of her mother's betrayal. Larry McClure, the father, was released on parole and returned to Virginia, where he lived in a mobile home. He was determined to reconnect with his daughters. First, he visited Amanda's foster parents, Guam and Alex, and introduced himself, asking to see Amanda and requesting her contact information. At the time, Larry was dishonest about Anna Marie's whereabouts, claiming she lived in North Carolina, 186 miles away, when in fact, he had never seen or spoken to her. Despite this, Larry was able to meet with Amanda, and their reunions eventually led to him introducing her and her friend John to illegal drugs that he manufactured in his camper. The tragic events unfolded on Valentine's Day. John, who was still recovering from the effects of drug abuse and was deeply in love with Amanda, decided to surprise her with a romantic evening at home. However, during the meal, John's affectionate words to Amanda made Larry extremely anxious, causing tension to build. Larry stopped his son-in-law John from speaking and asked if he could be completely honest with his wife Amanda. John agreed, and Larry suggested a game. John's legs were tied, and he was asked to answer all questions about his life truthfully. At first, the questions were harmless, but as Larry became more intoxicated, he started accusing John of being an undercover FBI agent. 3 weeks later, Larry and Amanda got married. To keep their relationship a secret, Larry changed his name. The new family decided to start fresh in Kentucky, vowing to quit illegal substances for good. To blend in with their neighbors, they even hung a U.S. flag on their rented house's door. By 2019, John's family, including his ex-wife and parents, had become worried because they hadn't heard from him. John's mother even went so far as to file a missing person report with the police. Meanwhile, Larry was in trouble with the law again. He had failed to notify the authorities that he had moved to a different state, which violated the terms of his probation. As a result, he was sent back to prison. Larry's mental state had deteriorated significantly due to his long history of substance abuse and mixing drugs with alcohol. Suddenly finding himself in a place where he couldn't access these substances triggered withdrawal symptoms, including increased anxiety and a blurred sense of reality. It's likely that this led him to make irrational decisions, such as marrying his own daughter. Larry became convinced that the real reason for his parole violation was to search for John's body, which he believed was buried in his backyard. He urgently needed to get a message to his daughters, Plaudard, Amanda, or Anna Marie, to dig up the body parts and rebury them in a different location. However, all prison calls are monitored, so he had to find a way to convey this information discreetly. Larry meticulously prepared a speech, considering every detail, but was prohibited from making any phone calls. Despite this, he eventually couldn't resist and confessed to the duty officer, although his intentions remain unclear. Larry's reasoning was that if he confessed to the murder before being charged, he might avoid the death penalty, and if he implicated his daughters, that would be even better. However, the officer was initially skeptical, wondering what Larry was talking about. Why would this addict incriminate himself? Nevertheless, the officer was required by law to investigate Larry's claims. Initially, the officer intended to perform a cursory verification, simply confirming that a statement had been made and the alleged crime scene had been checked, but finding nothing. However, it was discovered that John was indeed missing, and as a precaution, a police unit was sent to Larry's residence. Upon searching the area, they found traces of lime, just as Larry had mentioned, and soon every aspect of his confession was corroborated. The McClure sisters were promptly apprehended. Amanda and Anna Marie were stunned when their father and husband, Larry, confessed to a brutal murder. Their shock turned to disbelief when Larry tried to shift the blame, testifying that his daughters were responsible for the crime and he was an unwitting participant. As the family's story unraveled, each member attempted to distance themselves from the crime, claiming it was an accident. John's relatives were especially grief-stricken, as they had to come to terms with the fact that his body was never found, only remains. These remains had to be retrieved from forensic experts and transported to his parents for burial in a closed coffin. Despite the challenges, John's parents were able to lay him to rest, thanks to the help of friends who contributed financially, assisted with transportation, and made funeral arrangements. John was finally laid to rest at a Lutheran church on October 25, 2019. On February 15, the day after Valentine's Day, a member of the McClure family posted a message on John's Facebook page, pretending it was from him. The message said he was going on a trip and would be out of touch for a long time, and asked his friends not to worry about his extended absence. This was a tactic to mislead everyone, as the family knew they were about to kill John and didn't want to arouse suspicion. Despite the heinous nature of their crime, during the trial, Larry and Amanda received an additional 6 months in their sentence due to their incestuous marriage, which is illegal in their state. The trial began, and Larry was given the floor. He stated that he had felt remorse for his own children for most of his life. He admitted that when they were very young, he had committed a serious crime that put them in an orphanage. He explained that their birth mother had abandoned them, and he was the only one who had a heartache for his little ones. He expressed his extreme gratitude to the people who had adopted his babies. He said he would not hide, and even attended churches and prayed for their adoptive parents when he got out. He confessed that he had crazily wanted to make up for all the years he had missed. He confessed that he could have walked away from the crime if he had convinced Amanda not to do it, but he didn't. He admitted that the judge and jury would probably not understand him, and he shared their point of view, but emphasized that they weren't in his shoes. He mentioned that John was a fine young man and expressed his regret for John. He stated that if he could, he would turn things around, but no one could raise the dead, and he couldn't say no to Amanda, his favorite and youngest daughter, who didn't care about John. All Amanda wanted was to be able to withdraw government money from John's account. The trial went on for a very long time as the defendants flip-flopped back and forth on the decision to kill John. Amanda, who could not tolerate such a long trial, even made a deal with the investigators where she was promised to be charged with involuntary manslaughter at the next trial. Larry had given a very different speech when it all started, stating that the four of them had bought the ingredients to make illegal substances and went back to his trailer where he had started making them. Amanda had come up to him and said she wanted to get back at John. He explained that John, under the influence of drugs, had raped Anna Marie, who then got pregnant, and that he had to earn the trust of his daughters after all those years apart, so he couldn't refuse. Larry blamed himself for that and thought every day that he should hang himself, but questioned why it should be him if the crime was their fault. After Larry's speech, John's family got the floor. His mother sobbed non-stop, so much so that she couldn't say a word. She expressed that even if she could ever forgive the McClure family, she would never be able to forget what happened. She also conveyed that she wished she could live to see the day when one of them died before her. John's children were given a chance to speak, and they vehemently cursed the killers, declaring that they would never forgive them. The judge then delivered the final verdict, sentencing Larry McClure to life in prison without parole. When Amanda's punishment was announced, her adoptive parents were filled with regret, revealing to her that her biological father had been searching for her. They had raised her to have freedom of choice, but unaware that this freedom could have such severe consequences on her future. Amanda, however, shifted the blame to her biological father, claiming that his jealousy had driven her to commit the crime. Her adoptive parents pleaded with the judge to consider the negative influence of her biological father, arguing that their adopted daughter would not have committed such a brutal crime without it. Nevertheless, the prosecutors viewed the murder as a premeditated conspiracy, orchestrated so that Amanda and Larry could be together as a couple. The first hearing focused on Amanda, who received a 40-year sentence. However, the judge predicted she would likely serve only 20 years. During Anna Marie's hearing, she attempted to demonstrate her opposition to John's murder, but felt coerced by her father and sister to see it through. She only attended Larry and Amanda's wedding out of fear for her own future. Ultimately, Anna Marie was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ryan Widmer. Ryan Widmer, a young athlete, was convicted of a horrific crime and is serving a life sentence with parole eligibility in 2025, over 10 years after the tragedy occurred. He is now fighting to overturn his conviction. The case has garnered widespread public attention across 3 neighboring states, sparking controversy surrounding his guilt. The unusual circumstances of Sarah Widmer's death and the lack of a clear motive for the crime have made this case highly controversial. Ryan and Sarah met at a local cafe they both frequented. When Ryan ordered a cup of coffee, Sarah noticed a book on his table that she had recently read. This shared interest in literature sparked a conversation that lasted several hours, covering topics such as books, movies, music, and their common interests. As they learned more about each other, they discovered a shared love for nature, traveling, and animals. With each successive meeting, their relationship grew closer and more trusting, eventually blossoming into true love. After a few months, Ryan and Sarah's relationship blossomed, and he proposed to her during a romantic dinner at the same cafe where they first met. Overjoyed, Sarah accepted his proposal. The young couple set a wedding date and began searching for a beautiful 2-story house in Hamilton. On April 10, 2008, they exchanged vows in a quaint and intimate church ceremony, surrounded by their closest friends and family. Sarah brought every detail to life, making the day truly unforgettable. She stunned in her white dress, leaving Ryan spellbound. Following the grand banquet, which was met with thunderous applause and joyful cheers, they embarked on a 2-week honeymoon to the Hawaiian Islands, where they reveled in each other's company and the breathtaking natural beauty. The young couple, deeply in love, had made plans for a future together, filled with hopes and dreams of starting a family. However, fate had other plans. On Monday, August 11, 2008, after Sarah finished her shift at the dental clinic, she met Ryan at her favorite cafe. They had dinner together, engaging in lively conversation, and afterwards walked home, where Sarah began sorting out the groceries she had bought. She then sat down on the couch, and Ryan handed her a glass of water and a pill, as she had complained of a headache during dinner. They spent the rest of the evening watching their favorite TV show, exchanging gentle kisses, and eventually, Sarah headed upstairs to the bedroom. She undressed, neatly folding her clothes, prepared a towel, lit scented candles, and put on her favorite music. Meanwhile, Ryan stayed downstairs, flipping channels on the TV remote, briefly stopping at a soccer game, and lying on the couch for about 10 minutes. He called out to Sarah over the soft music, but she didn't respond. Ryan slowly made his way upstairs, entered the bedroom, and turned on the TV. He called out to Sarah again, but was met with silence. Panic started to set in, and he rushed to the bathroom, where he found Sarah lying face down in the tub. Ryan immediately pulled the plug and grabbed the phone to call emergency services. At 10:49 p.m., the service recorded the call, with Ryan frantically yelling that his wife had drowned in the bathtub, likely having fallen asleep. In his panic, Ryan failed to follow the dispatcher's instructions, wasting precious time. Under the dispatcher's careful guidance, Ryan eventually managed to pull Sarah out of the tub and performed CPR on her repeatedly. The ambulance, accompanied by police officers, arrived at the Widmer home just 6 minutes after the call. The police were initially drawn to the scene of the tragedy. Upon inspection, the bathroom appeared clean and dry, with no signs of water or scattered supplies that would indicate a hasty removal of a body from the water. The bathroom was meticulously clean. Sarah lay on the bedroom floor, nude with dry skin, but her wet hair suggested drowning. The bedroom was also tidy, leading law enforcement to suspect murder. Ryan, wearing only his underwear, was thrashing about the bedroom. When medical professionals found no pulse, they began performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation. A pinkish-white discharge from Sarah's nose and mouth confirmed drowning. Medical staff attempted to intubate Sarah twice as she lay on the bedroom floor, but both attempts failed. She was then rushed to an ambulance, where 2 more attempts were made to revive her heart using a defibrillator, again without success. Throughout the ordeal, Ryan remained by his wife's side, visibly distraught and anxious, as described by medical staff. Within 20 minutes of arriving at the hospital, medical staff attempted to revive Sarah, but at 11:41 p.m., an emergency physician pronounced her dead. Ryan, overcome with grief, fell to his knees in the hospital hallway and wept. The sudden tragedy that occurred just 4 months after the wedding sent shockwaves throughout the city, and Ryan became the prime suspect in the murder of his young wife. Ryan's initial statement, given at the hospital, raised doubts about its accuracy. He claimed that only he and his wife were at home, and that nothing out of the ordinary had happened. They had dinner at a cafe, returned home, and watched TV together. Sarah had a headache, and he gave her painkillers and helped her to the bathroom when he found her. However, the emergency call record showed that the victim was lying face down, contradicting Ryan's account. The man was distraught, repeatedly calling out for Sarah. Under pressure from the investigator, Ryan shifted from being a victim to a participant in the investigation, working to uncover what had happened to Sarah that night. He agreed to let investigators search their house. Analysis of the medication Sarah took revealed it was a common painkiller, but it was discovered that Sarah's frequent headaches and migraines had led her to take a course of drugs that altered her hormonal balance, causing uncontrollable sleep. This became the initial theory behind Sarah's death. After searching the house, police found bloodstains on the carpet. When they arrived, the bathtub was dry and there were no wet towels. The tile floor was also dry and clean, leading police to suspect that Sarah had been murdered. No wet items, clothing, or other objects were found in the house that could have been used to soak up water. Ryan's statements during the 911 call and at the hospital were contradictory, which raised suspicions and turned him from a victim into a suspect. An examination of Sarah's body revealed bruises on her forehead, neck, armpit, and upper lip, as well as lacerations on her upper lip. However, there was no clear evidence of a struggle, as her fingernails were not broken or chipped, and there were no marks on her hands, elbows, or knees. Ryan's body also showed no signs of injury or struggle. An investigation by Sheriff Bishop was inconclusive, as all the bathroom supplies were in place, and there were no signs of resistance. It was unclear whether Sarah had taken a bath that evening, or if she had not resisted and allowed her husband to drown her. Sarah's autopsy, led by Dr. Russell Apt Grove, revealed that the cause of death was drowning, accompanied by multiple muscle hemorrhages in the front of her neck and contusions on her scalp. These injuries, which occurred before her death, raised many questions, but their origin remained unknown. The investigation struggled to make progress with no leads or answers. The toxicology tests found no traces of illicit or alcoholic substances in Sarah's blood. On August 13, 2008, Ryan was arrested on suspicion of aggravated murder of his wife. The decision was based on the discrepancies in the emergency call and the crime scene, as well as the injuries found on Sarah's body. This evidence was sufficient to charge him with her murder by drowning. Despite Ryan and Sarah's seemingly perfect relationship, with friends and neighbors testifying to their deep love for each other, and their public displays of affection, no one could understand what drove them to such a tragic end. In March 2009, the first court hearing took place. Ron Cronenberger, the emergency dispatcher who received the call, testified as a witness. He described Ryan as remaining calm during their conversation, stating that it seemed like Ryan was pretending to perform CPR by blowing into the tube. The prosecution argued that the 911 call, the crime scene, and Sarah's injuries provided sufficient evidence to prove Ryan's guilt. They alleged that Ryan had forcibly drowned Sarah by holding her underwater in a bathtub. The bathtub was a crucial piece of evidence in the case. Upon examination, police found fingerprint streaks, supposedly left by human hands, closer to the middle of the tub. Using a reflected ultraviolet imaging process, fingerprints and smears were detected on the tub. A forearm print was identified, and a hair follicle test revealed that it was left by an adult male, although the exact age of the print could not be determined. However, the bathtub was not the critical evidence needed to prove the struggle between Ryan and Sarah. The prosecution suggested to the jury that a violent altercation likely occurred that night at the Widmer home for unknown reasons, and that the suspect deliberately kept quiet about it. The defense team called in an expert to testify that it is highly unlikely for someone to fall asleep and drown in a bathtub unless they were under the influence of illegal drugs or alcohol. The expert explained that the sensation of water on the face would normally wake a person up or trigger a gag reflex, causing them to cough or choke. Even if the person didn't wake up, the lack of oxygen would eventually rouse them. The pathologist who performed the autopsy testified that if Sarah's body was dry, but her hair was wet, it could indicate that her head was forcibly pushed off the edge of a bathtub, toilet, or sink. This could have happened while her head was facing forward or backward, whether the water was running or the bathtub was full. The prosecution argued that Ryan held Sarah's head underwater until she drowned, making him guilty of the crime. On the other hand, the defense argued that Ryan was innocent, primarily because there was no clear motive for the alleged crime. They pointed out that if there had been a violent struggle, as the prosecution claimed, there would be evidence of it. However, there were no injuries on Ryan, and Sarah's fingernails showed no signs of breaking or chipping, suggesting that there was no struggle. They claimed that the injuries found on Sarah were caused by the prolonged CPR, direct cardiac massage, and repeated intubation attempts made that night at the house, in the ambulance, and at the hospital. At the defense's request, Dr. Werner Spitz performed a second autopsy on Sarah. He confirmed that the cause of death was drowning and observed injuries to her neck, arms, upper lip, skull, a lacerated liver, and bleeding on her neck. However, he couldn't determine whether these injuries occurred during CPR. It was argued that the EMTs tried to resuscitate Sarah for about 45 minutes and that the deep neck bleeding likely resulted from an IV inserted in that area. The EMTs had been unable to access her arm veins. Instead of ruling it a homicide, Dr. Spitz concluded that Sarah's death was undetermined. The defense based their case on the fact that Sarah's skin was dry, which dries faster than her hair. They conducted experiments to demonstrate that when Ryan found his wife unconscious, he instinctively pulled the drain plug to try and help her and then called emergency services. This sequence of events explains why her body was drier than expected. The water had already drained from the bathtub by the time Ryan called 911. An expert witness demonstrated that a person can dry off in as little as 7 minutes after emerging from the water. A second court hearing was set for May 2010. Ryan's father, Gary, claimed that the prosecution had obtained DNA results showing that Sarah had the disease, but the prosecutor refused to disclose them, believing they wouldn't have changed the jury's verdict. However, it remains uncertain whether the jury's decision would have been different if they had received reliable evidence about Sarah's medical condition, which could have contributed to her drowning. The official reason for denying a retrial was the jury's errors in their investigation. Despite another unsuccessful court hearing, Ryan remained incarcerated. The Widmer family received an unwelcome shock when Jennifer Cruz arrived at the prosecutor's office to testify against Ryan, claiming he was guilty. She identified herself as a friend of Ryan's, stating that they had regular communication via phone or email. According to Jennifer, Ryan contacted her on October 26, 2009 at 11:09 p.m., and his voice was highly distressed. He confided in her, saying that he had assaulted Sarah in the living room on the day she died. The trigger for the altercation was Sarah's discovery of Ryan's infidelity, leading to a prolonged argument that started downstairs and continued in the bedroom. Ryan pushed Sarah into the bathroom, leaving her without checking on her well-being. After calming down, he found Sarah floating lifelessly in the full bathtub. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Ryan allegedly wiped the water from the bathroom floor using towels and concocted a story about the accident. However, Ryan's defense team vigorously disputed Jennifer's testimony, pointing out several inconsistencies. The lawyers argued that Jennifer's account was implausible, as no wet towels were found anywhere in the house, including the dryer. Furthermore, there was no evidence of infidelity in Ryan and Sarah's marriage. The family was financially stable, and they never quarreled. Ryan's friends described him as a kind, helpful, and even-tempered person who never displayed anger. Additionally, Ryan stood to gain nothing from Sarah's death, as they did not have a life insurance policy. Before the third trial, Jennifer Cruz's credibility was called into question, and she was prevented from testifying as a witness. This was partly due to evidence of her past infidelities and petty theft convictions. Additionally, a phone call in which Ryan allegedly confessed to her was not corroborated. In January 2011, a new trial was held, prompted by the discovery of fresh evidence. The defense presented a medical opinion suggesting that Sarah's sudden loss of consciousness and subsequent drowning might have been caused by her underlying medical condition. Medical experts testified that Sarah's existing cardiac or neurological defects could have led to her losing consciousness, but the state's medical experts disputed these claims. Sarah's co-workers revealed that she often slept in her car before starting her shift at the dental clinic, and that she frequently suffered from allergies and stomach pains. On the day of her death, Sarah mentioned to her co-worker, Dr. Benjamin Mesmer, that she was experiencing a headache and stomach pain. Later that evening, a friend spoke with Sarah, observing that she looked extremely tired and complained of a headache and neck pain. Sarah's friends were aware of her ability to fall asleep easily in unexpected places, with one even speculating that she might have had narcolepsy. However, Sarah's mother testified that her daughter did not have any sleep disorders and was a healthy child who regularly underwent medical examinations, which showed she was in perfect health. The defense argued that Sarah's death was not caused by forced drowning because she didn't have any injuries to the small bones of her neck or defensive wounds on her arms and legs. Although the defense couldn't explain how Sarah died, an emergency medicine expert testified that every year, approximately 300,000 people die suddenly in the United States, and in about 33% of those cases, autopsy results are normal and show no underlying medical conditions. After deliberating for 12 hours, the jury found Ryan guilty of murder and sentenced him to 15 years in prison. Basing their decision on the fact that Sarah's body was not wet, Ryan's past history, and their belief that he had staged his 911 call. Ryan's family has passionately defended him, and the case, which dates back over 10 years, continues to unite like-minded individuals who hope to clear his name through DNA testing. While genetic material often plays a crucial role in resolving disputed charges and exonerations in cases involving unexplained deaths, what sets this case apart is the unusual request for the victim's DNA, rather than the person convicted. Unfortunately, a Warren County judge has already rejected Ryan Widmer's request to have the victim's DNA tested. Mike Allen, a former Hamilton prosecutor, noted that after listening to all 3 trials, he never found a clear motive, which is unusual in a murder case. However, the prosecutor is not required to prove motive, which makes this case even more peculiar. Ryan Widmer is awaiting a federal court decision on a motion for his release. He has been imprisoned for 14 years, and his first opportunity for release will be in July 2025 unless a federal judge rules in his favor. According to University of Cincinnati law professor Donald Custer, who also works with the Ohio Innocence Project, proving innocence is not enough to be exonerated. There must be evidence of a constitutional error in the judicial process. In 2025, Widmer will be eligible for parole, but his lawyers believe it's unlikely he'll be granted parole because the parole board tends to favor inmates who express remorse, whereas Widmer maintains his innocence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Smith. Kelsey Ann Smith was born on May 3, 1989 in Overland Park, Kansas to Greg and Missy Smith, and was one of 5 siblings. After graduating from Shawnee Mission West High School on May 24, 2007, she was looking forward to enrolling in college that fall. Known for her outgoing and friendly nature, Kelsey's sense of humor was infectious, and she was a talented clarinet player in a marching band. On June 2, 2007, Kelsey worked her shift at the AMC movie theater. That morning, her mother, Missy, departed for a friend's wedding, unaware that their family's life was about to take a devastating turn and she would never see her daughter alive again. Before leaving, Missy had bid Kelsey farewell, oblivious to the tragic events that would soon unfold. Kelsey drove to work in the car her parents had given her. Her morning shift passed without incident. After finishing work, she met up with her father and sister Lindsay. The three of them then headed to an amusement park, where they had a wonderful time. Unfortunately, the day didn't end on a happy note. Around 6 p.m., Kelsey decided to go shopping and asked her sister to accompany her, but her sister declined. So, Kelsey left the house by herself and drove to the nearest Target department store. Before heading out, she informed her father, Greg, a policeman who adored his children, about her plans and expressed her love for him. As a caring father, Greg had taught his children basic self-defense techniques and always emphasized the importance of taking safety precautions. About an hour later, Kelsey phoned her mother, who was driving home from a friend's wedding, and told her she was out shopping. They had a brief conversation and made plans to meet up at home. Later that evening, Kelsey's boyfriend, John, arrived at the Smiths' house. As someone Greg trusted, John often spent time at their home, and everyone assumed their relationship would eventually become more serious. Kelsey had gone to the store to buy a gift for John. Meanwhile, John tried to call her, but the call didn't go through. He then went to her house, but she was nowhere to be found. Greg started calling his daughter, but she didn't answer. After numerous failed attempts to reach Kelsey, Greg grew increasingly worried. As a policeman, he tried to remain calm, but as a father, his concern only intensified with every passing minute. Greg began calling his daughter Kelsey's friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts or why she was ignoring calls and texts. This was unusual for Kelsey, who always made it a point to check in with her family, even if she was running just a little behind schedule. After a while, John and Kelsey's sister Lindsay decided to take action, getting into their car to search the area for Kelsey's vehicle. They started by checking the parking lots of various stores and eventually found a Buick registered to Kelsey in one of them. Although Kelsey had told her father she was headed to Target, her car was actually parked near a different store. John examined the car, but Kelsey was nowhere to be found. Lindsay quickly phoned their father to update him on the situation, and he warned them not to disturb anything, as the car could potentially be a crime scene. It was essential to preserve any evidence that might be present. Greg contacted the police to report his daughter Kelsey missing. The detectives promptly arrived at the location where John and Lindsay had found Kelsey's car. What struck Greg and everyone else as odd was that her car wasn't in the Target parking lot, as expected, but rather next to another store, in a dimly lit area of the parking lot. The detectives conducted a thorough examination of the car, searching for any clues that might lead them to Kelsey. However, they only found a package, some gift wrapping paper, and the gift Kelsey had purchased for her boyfriend, John. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood stains, or anything of that nature. The keys were discovered under the driver's seat, but then the detectives stumbled upon something suspicious, a piece of fabric resembling a t-shirt sticking out of the trunk. With anxiety, Greg opened the trunk, only to find it empty. Kelsey was nowhere to be found. However, it was clear that she had been to Target to buy a gift for John. Forensic experts meticulously examined the car and discovered a thumbprint on the seatbelt, but it didn't match Kelsey or anyone with access to the vehicle. Kelsey had recently graduated from high school with plans to attend the University of Kansas, where she aimed to become a veterinarian. Throughout her academic career, she had consistently excelled as an exemplary student. Her bright and ambitious personality, combined with her cheerful demeanor, had her whole life ahead of her. Yet she had inexplicably vanished, leaving her family desperate for answers. Despite their ongoing efforts, the police failed to find any evidence suggesting the car was a crime scene, apart from the unidentified fingerprint. It seemed as though someone had simply abandoned the car in the parking lot. Determined to uncover more information about Kelsey's disappearance, detectives visited Target, hoping to find clues in the CCTV footage. Although the store was closed by the time they arrived, they managed to find an employee who let them in and showed them the recordings. The police monitored Kelsey's every move for several hours, but her trip to the store seemed ordinary. She purchased the necessary items, paid, and left the store without incident. There was no indication of any problems or disputes with anyone while she was in the store. She remained calm and departed alone. However, something strange happened afterwards. Instead of driving home as planned, Kelsey drove in the opposite direction after getting into her car. Unfortunately, the recording quality was poor, making it impossible to see any details. This raised several important questions. Why did Kelsey deviate from her planned route? Was she driving the car herself? Could she have been hiding of her own free will? Before dawn, Greg and Missy visited the police station, where detectives questioned them extensively. As a policeman, Greg was aware that this was a standard procedure in investigations of this nature. The detectives needed to rule out the possibility of family involvement in the crime. Greg knew that the sooner he and Missy cooperated, the sooner they would be cleared as suspects, and the police could focus on pursuing other leads. Greg and Missy answered all the questions, and the police eventually cleared them as suspects. The next person of interest was Kelsey's boyfriend, John. Since Kelsey had spent most of her free time with him in the days leading up to her disappearance, and he was the last person she had contact with, the police wanted to investigate his alibi. They needed to know what John had been doing before he went to Kelsey's house and told her father he couldn't reach her. As partners are often closely tied to what happens to their loved ones, the detectives decided to intensify their questioning of John. They asked him the same questions, rephrased, to observe his reactions and identify any inconsistencies in his story. It took around 2 hours, but John was insistent he had no involvement in Kelsey's disappearance and that their relationship was fine. He cooperated fully, answering all the detectives' questions and allowing them to examine his phone's contents. Although the officers tended to believe John was telling the truth and unlikely to be involved in Kelsey's disappearance, they didn't entirely rule him out as a suspect. Kelsey's family couldn't simply wait, so they launched their own investigation. Greg knew that with each passing hour, the chances of finding his daughter alive decreased. Greg, Missy, and John organized volunteers into groups to search the area. Each volunteer received a bundle of Kelsey's missing person flyers and canvassed the necessary streets, asking if anyone had seen her. Greg also contacted radio stations, requesting airtime to appeal for information about his daughter's disappearance, asking anyone with valuable information to contact the police or the Smith family. An hour after radio stations broke the news of Kelsey's disappearance, TV channels picked up the story, greatly improving the chances of finding her quickly. Her classmates promptly joined the search effort, going door to door in the neighborhood, hoping to find someone who may have seen or heard something unusual, no matter how insignificant it might have seemed at the time. Any detail, no matter how small, was crucial to the investigation. One of the crucial questions the police had to address was Kelsey's whereabouts for 3 hours, from the time she left Target until John and Lindsay found her car. To answer this, investigators turned to surveillance cameras once more. Fortunately, the parking lot where Kelsey's car was found had cameras, although they belonged to a different store. However, the poor quality of the recording and inadequate lighting in that area of the parking lot made it impossible for detectives to gather any meaningful information about Kelsey's movements. They did see her car drive into the unlit area, followed by the headlights going out. Shortly after, the driver exited the vehicle and left, but the footage only showed a person's silhouette, making it unclear whether it was Kelsey or someone else. This lack of progress was frustrating for the police. Kelsey's family, however, saw this as a positive sign. They were confident that she had no reason to hide. Their top priority was to find Kelsey alive. With no new leads, the police decided to re-examine the target surveillance footage, this time using better monitors. They retraced every step Kelsey took while inside the store, but found nothing suspicious. Everything appeared normal. Kelsey purchased the necessary items and left the store like a typical customer. In the parking lot, a crucial event may have led to Kelsey's disappearance. Although the recording was of poor quality, the detectives managed to identify a suspicious aspect. After leaving the store, Kelsey proceeded to her car in the parking lot and opened the rear door to load the purchases. Then, she headed towards the driver's door. At that moment, a blurry figure appeared, prompting the investigators to suspect an attack. The police believed that Kelsey was likely abducted as she entered her car. The investigators repeatedly reviewed the recording, but the viewing angle and quality did not permit a full understanding of the events. The car door closed, and the vehicle left the parking lot in about 15 seconds. It's possible that the car turned in the opposite direction from Kelsey's house, either because she wasn't driving or someone was threatening her. The detectives reluctantly informed Kelsey's parents that their daughter was probably the victim of an abduction. The only evidence available to the police was the video recording of the abduction, but the perpetrator's face was not visible. The abductor wore a white t-shirt and dark shorts. The investigators went back to the target CCTV footage, this time specifically looking for someone wearing a white t-shirt and dark shorts. That's when they noticed something they'd previously missed. A man matching that description was following Kelsey everywhere she went. He kept a safe distance to avoid arousing her suspicion, but he was always lurking. There was no doubt this man was tailing Kelsey. When she went to the checkout to pay, he casually made his way to the exit, clearly planning to wait for her in the parking lot. The police eventually obtained a clearer image of his face, though it wasn't perfect. They hoped someone would recognize him and come forward. The police appealed to the community for help in identifying the man, and they received over 1,000 calls with potential leads. It took a lot of time to sift through all that data. Detectives worked to weed out the information that was unlikely to be relevant to the case. They questioned several people who resembled the man, but none of them were the one they were looking for. A crucial breakthrough came when police tracked down Kelsey's phone after she vanished. The phone's signal was detected in a wooded area close to Longview Lake, Missouri, roughly 15 miles from the Target store where she was last seen. At this point, the FBI had already joined the investigation. They coordinated a massive search effort in the area where Kelsey's phone was last active, mobilizing around 200 people to participate. Kelsey was found 4 days after her abduction. Remarkably, just 45 minutes after her cell phone company provided crucial information about her phone activity, a lead worth exploring. Tragically, she was found dead, with her killer attempting to conceal evidence by hiding her body under leaves and tree branches. The fact that Kelsey's body was naked suggested that the motive behind the crime was sexual. Her personal belongings were discovered just a few feet away from her body. The forensic examination revealed that Kelsey had died from strangulation, with the killer using her own belt to take her life. The news of Kelsey's death was devastating for her family and friends. With the killer still at large, the police were under pressure to catch him as soon as possible, fearing that he might strike again and kidnap another victim. At this stage in the investigation, the only lead the police had was CCTV footage, which they decided to re-examine thoroughly. They found Kelsey's abandoned car in the Target parking lot at 9:17 p.m. Upon reviewing the same time frame, officers saw a man running to a dark pickup truck parked nearby, getting in, and speeding away at 9:22 p.m. Although it was dark when the truck left, investigators rewound the footage and confirmed the blue pickup had arrived at 6:55 p.m. Kelsey pulled into the lot a minute later, parking alongside the truck. The police released images of the pickup and the man who followed Kelsey, hoping someone would identify him. 2 callers contacted the police, claiming the man was Edwin Hall, a 26-year-old married father who owned a pickup truck. The police discovered Hall had no adult convictions, but a juvenile record for threatening his adoptive sister with a bread knife at 15. When the police arrived at Hall's home, they saw him putting things in his car, planning to leave with his family. The police arrested him and took him to a police station for questioning. Hall initially denied any involvement in Kelsey's disappearance and death, but the CCTV footage from Target left no doubt that he was following Kelsey. When confronted with the evidence, Hall admitted that he watched Kelsey because he liked her legs, but he continued to deny any contact with her after she left the store. The police discovered Hall's thumbprint on the seatbelt in Kelsey's car, conclusively linking him to her abduction and murder. Despite his denials, the police were certain Hall was the one who accosted Kelsey in the parking lot. After being informed of the fingerprint match, Hall chose not to wait for the DNA results and confessed to the crime in hopes of avoiding the death penalty. Hall provided a detailed account of the events. He admitted to having been drawn to Kelsey when he saw her in the Target parking lot. He began following her while she shopped, waiting for the opportunity to strike. Once she returned to her car, Hall pulled out a gun and attacked her. He forced her into her car, drove her to a secluded wooded area outside the city, and ordered her to undress. Fearing she would reveal the assault, Hall ultimately took Kelsey's life. After the murder, Hall concealed Kelsey's body under branches and leaves. He drove back to the city, abandoning Kelsey's car in a nearby parking lot. From there, he returned to Target, where his pickup truck was parked, and drove home. After their daughter Kelsey's death, Missy and Greg Smith observed that most violent crimes targeted children and young adults. They were determined to prevent this from happening to others. With this goal in mind, they developed safety awareness seminars. As a police officer at the time of Kelsey's death, Greg was able to apply the training methods he had learned on the force to a civilian setting. The Kelsey Smith Act, which was passed in Kansas in 2009, has since been replicated in 23 other states. However, in 2016, it failed to pass the U.S. House of Representatives due to concerns among lawmakers about the potential invasion of privacy, as the bill would have allowed law enforcement to access information without subpoenas. The Smiths emphasized that only location data would be accessible, not personal content like texts, pictures, and phone calls. They have been advocating for a change in Congress. Their drive to push for this change stems from the tragic loss of their daughter, Kelsey. Kelsey was 18 years old, a recent high school graduate, when she went missing after leaving a Target store in Overland Park. It took 4 days for her cell phone company to provide location information, which ultimately led the police to find her body within 45 minutes. The Smiths have dedicated their lives to passing legislation that would expedite the process of obtaining location information in emergency situations, hoping to spare other families the agony of uncertainty they faced. As Missy Smith noted, had this legislation been in place, they would have saved 4 days of searching for Kelsey, not knowing if she was alive or what her fate was. In 2008, Edwin Hall was found guilty on all counts related to Kelsey's disappearance and murder. He apologized to the Smiths during the trial, expressing his deep regret. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. Over the past 16 years, Kelsey, who would have turned 34 on May 3rd, has become a symbol of the movement to compel telecommunications providers to respond promptly in emergency situations, particularly as GPS and cell phone technology have continued to advance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kaler family. The story of the Kaler family begins with James Craig Kaler, born in 1963 in Weatherford, Texas. His future wife, Karen Kaler, née White, was born in the same city in 1965. They met in the early 1980s as students at a Texas university. Craig was graduating in engineering, while Karen was a freshman in the humanities department. They quickly found common ground and soon began a romantic relationship. They were young, in love, and, by all appearances, the perfect couple. Craig was known for his determination and talent in engineering during his university years. In the late 1980s, after graduation, they had a modest wedding attended only by close friends and family. Their first child, Emily, was born in 1991, followed by Lauren in 1993. The family lived in a cozy house in Weatherford and were quite well off by local standards. In 1999, when Karen was expecting her third child, Craig received a lucrative job offer at a large utility company in Weatherford. His promotion coincided with the birth of their son, Sean, whom he adored. With a higher income, Craig purchased a spacious house in the city's most prestigious neighborhood and acquired a reliable family car. Karen stayed at home, and Craig became the primary breadwinner. Outwardly, the family appeared perfect. The daughters, Emily and Lauren, were talented in sports and music. They often participated in vocal competitions and local events. Emily excelled in school and was accepted into a prestigious pharmacy college. Lauren, an excellent student, dreamed of attending a conservatory to pursue a career in music. Sean was an outgoing, kind, and inquisitive boy interested in pneumatics. He aspired to become an archaeologist. He was very close to his parents and sisters. Craig provided for his family, while Karen made the home comfortable, raised the children, and baked tasty treats. They were active in the community and continuously strived to improve their neighborhood. They raised 3 wonderful and talented children. However, behind the facade of perfection lay numerous problems that family members kept hidden. In 2007, Karen admitted to her younger sister Linda that she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She revealed that Craig had been controlling and monitoring her for years, a control that was increasing. Craig demanded detailed accounts of all expenditures, not just major purchases, but everyday household expenses as well. Karen provided him with supermarket receipts, bank transaction data, and reported her whereabouts daily while he was at work. The entire Kaler family lived on a strict schedule set by Craig. When he returned home from work, his wife and children had to be there to meet him promptly. They adhered to precise times for going to bed, waking up, and eating meals. Even intimacy between the couple was scheduled. Over time, Craig's obsession with control intensified. He became increasingly demanding and selfish. Karen's actions were scheduled down to the hour. She felt enslaved by his demands. The narrative reflects an ostensibly perfect picture, but reveals underlying difficulties faced by each member of this seemingly ideal family. She had no free time, only duties and responsibilities. She tried to fulfill all of her husband's demands, hoping that he would loosen his control. They wanted to get back to their old life, but Craig seemed to enjoy his control and was unwilling to change. Linda was deeply disturbed by her sister's revelations. Like everyone else, she had seen Craig as the perfect husband, father, and family man. It turned out he was a domestic tyrant. However, Karen did not want to destroy her family. Besides, she and her children were financially dependent on Craig. Therefore, she decided to find a job that would provide her with a stable income. Despite her advanced age and 3 children, Karen was in great physical shape. She always adhered to good nutrition principles, periodically followed diets, and took care of herself. Every day, she went jogging. Secretly from her husband, she enrolled in a local fitness club where she started working out for several hours each day. It was her way of blowing off steam, distracting herself, and getting her thoughts in order. She attended the gym while Craig was at work and didn't notice him watching her workout sessions occasionally. Soon, the management of the sports club noticed the attractive, fit, and diligent woman. Karen was offered an opportunity to try herself as a fitness instructor with a probationary period and the possibility of an official labor contract. The former housewife could not have dreamed of such an opportunity because now she could continue doing what she loved and even receive decent remuneration for it. Eventually, Craig found out that his wife was going to the gym regularly. Karen assumed that her husband would forbid her from attending. But surprisingly, he reacted calmly. He even seemed pleased that his wife had found something meaningful to do and was now earning her own money. His only conditions were that she must be home when he arrived, cook meals continually, and not disrupt their intimate life plans. Karen found these conditions acceptable because now she had freedom of action and the ability to provide for herself without having to justify every dime spent to her husband. There was a new instructor at the fitness club named Sunny Rice. Karen and Sunny quickly became friends. For Karen, who had been a stay-at-home mom for many years and had few opportunities to socialize outside the family, Sunny became a trusted confidant. The women spent time together at work every day. Sometimes they went for walks, drank coffee, and had heartfelt conversations. Their friendship soon evolved into something more profound. Naturally, they kept their feelings and relationship a secret from everyone. Eventually, Karen felt the need to disclose everything to her husband. She spent months preparing for this conversation, struggling to find the right words and contemplating the potential consequences. Finally, she opened up to Craig. Although Craig was puzzled by his wife's revelation, he remained calm and composed. He did not react dramatically. However, the next day, Craig expressed that he agreed with his wife's relationship with Sunny, but on one condition: that he wanted to join them. Nonetheless, Craig took the initiative and began acquainting Sunny by sending her flowers and small gifts. He appeared to view this as an opportunity to enhance his intimate life and inject new passion into his marriage with Karen. Their unusual love triangle did not last long before it became clear that Craig was not welcome in their relationship. Feeling insulted, Craig demanded that Karen end the relationship with Sunny immediately. However, Karen continued to see Sunny as she was genuinely in love. After nearly 2 decades of marriage, it seemed Karen was ready to leave her husband for this new relationship, a significant move involving secrecy and considerations of relocating to another state. Following months of scandals, confrontations, and agonizing deliberations, Craig concluded that the best way to save his family would be to relocate out of state. He began searching for a new job and soon secured a position as a water director for a large company in Columbia, Missouri, a city near Kansas. In the summer of 2008, the family's move proved challenging. The children had to switch schools, make new friends, and adapt to life in a different city. Although the family was financially stable, Craig's new position came with nearly double his previous salary in Weatherford. However, this increase in earnings brought more responsibilities and longer working hours. Craig believed that this change would end Sunny's influence in his wife's life. However, his assumption was incorrect. Karen and Sunny continued to communicate frequently through phone calls, texts, and clandestine meetings. They would drive to meet halfway and spend a few hours in roadside hotels before heading back home. By then, Karen realized her marriage was beyond repair. She no longer loved her husband. Divorce was imminent. These secret meetings persisted until December 2008. On New Year's Eve, the Kaler family returned to their hometown to visit relatives and friends. Sunny attended the same party. Initially, Karen and Sunny kept a low profile, merely exchanging greetings. However, as the evening wore on and alcohol took its toll, they seemed to forget social conventions. The lovers were inseparable, holding hands, exchanging longing glances, and some guests even noticed them kissing. Craig felt not only anger but also fury at this public behavior. Karen had insulted and humiliated him in front of numerous former roommates, friends, and co-workers by making her affair public. Craig caused a scene at the party by verbally attacking both his wife and Sunny. In a fit of rage, Craig forcibly dragged Karen away from the gathering. On their way home, he lost control of himself entirely, grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her so violently that her dress tore. He then slapped her hard enough for her to stumble and hit her head forcefully. Upon returning home, the conflict didn't diminish, it intensified over time. A few days later, Karen informed Craig of her decision to leave him. She initiated divorce proceedings and demanded custody of their children. Initially, Craig attempted to apologize, pleading to keep the family intact for the sake of the children and proposing to give their marriage another chance. However, Karen was resolute and obtained a divorce. Craig subsequently began contacting mutual friends and relatives, requesting them to persuade Karen not to break up the family and stay with him. Despite his efforts, she firmly told him that she was leaving for Sonny and had never been truly happy in their marriage. In early spring 2009, while they were still residing under the same roof, another argument erupted. Craig resorted to physical violence for the first time since that New Year's Eve party. Karen reported him to the police, leading to his arrest. At the station, he claimed his wife was hysterical and that he merely held her tightly to calm her down, which caused the bruises on her arms. Following this incident, without waiting for an official divorce, Karen moved out with the children. This development was a serious blow for Craig, but even more so when he learned that his daughters sided with their mother. They mentioned seeing her happy for the first time in a long time. He perceived this as a betrayal and refused to communicate with Emily and Lauren, only calling Sean and taking him on weekends while blatantly ignoring his daughters. Meanwhile, despite ongoing divorce proceedings, Craig still hoped his wife would reconsider and return to him. He displayed jealousy, tried to control her movements, and even followed her around town in a rental car in an attempt to remain undetected. Additionally, he attempted setting up a hidden camera in her house when no one was present. Naturally, all of these activities took time and effort, forcing Craig to sacrifice work. Initially, he took a vacation, then he claimed illness and eventually started skipping work without explanation. This behavior led to his termination from employment. After losing his job and primary source of income, Craig moved into his parents' house as he could no longer afford his own accommodations. With plenty of free time, he managed to stalk his ex-wife all day. This behavior pushed her to take him to court to prevent him from approaching her. On the evening of November 29th, the Burling Police Department received an alarming call about a suspicious van and the sound of gunshots. Dorothy's neighbors mentioned seeing a small truck pull up at the elderly woman's home. They observed a man get out and enter the house. After that, they heard screams and gunshots, but were unsure about what transpired exactly. The man then exited the house, got back into his truck, and drove away swiftly. The neighbors didn't try to apprehend him as they feared he was armed. When police arrived at the scene, they encountered a terrified 10-year-old boy crying for help, Sean Kaler, who couldn't explain what had happened, but made it clear that something terrifying awaited inside. Near the front door, police discovered Dorothy lying in a pool of blood. Surprisingly, she was still alive, despite enduring 2 gunshot wounds. In the kitchen, Karen's lifeless body, she had been shot in the chest and then fatally shot in the head at close range by her ex-husband. Karen's oldest daughter, 18-year-old Emily, was found between a wall and a couch. She had apparently tried hiding from her enraged father, but was caught and shot twice at point-blank range. Her younger sister Lauren was discovered in a bedroom on another floor. She too was covered in blood, but still alive, faintly pleading for help and repeatedly indicating it was her father who did this. The elderly woman and Lauren were immediately rushed to an intensive care unit at a nearby hospital. Despite doctors' best efforts, their lives could not be saved. Lauren succumbed to massive blood loss and damage to her internal organs on December 1st morning, while her great-grandmother passed away just hours later that day. The only surviving witness, Sean, was deeply traumatized. Psychologists began working with him immediately. Sean required a comprehensive interview as he was the sole surviving witness to the tragic events at his great-grandmother's house. He stated that on that evening, his mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner while he approached her to request his favorite pies. Suddenly, the back door of the house swung open and their father entered, holding a shotgun. Without uttering a word, the man aimed the gun at his ex-wife and fired. He then moved closer and shot her again. Initially, Sean froze in terror. His father turned toward him but did not aim. Rather, he stared silently and intently at him. Realizing the imminent danger, Sean knew he had to flee. He bolted through the open back door. The boy ran towards the main entrance with hopes of alerting his grandmother and sisters to call for help. However, as he reached the threshold, several more gunshots rang out. Afraid to enter the house, he hid in a small outbuilding and waited in dread for his father to come after him. Where was Mr. Kaler? Craig was immediately put on the wanted list, with warnings indicating he was armed and extremely dangerous. Meanwhile, police received several reports of a speeding truck, which aided them in quickly determining the direction in which the gunman was traveling. At one point, Kaler abandoned his vehicle in a wooded area and began walking down an isolated road. Law enforcement authorities soon caught up with him and apprehended him by morning. Kaler had left the rifle and ammunition in the back seat of his vehicle. Prescription medication for depression and anxiety disorders lay next to the driver's seat. Kaler did not resist arrest, nor seemed concerned about what would happen next. He appeared confused, even frightened, and openly admitted to being armed with a gun and hunting knife, but claimed he had no intention of using them further. He also confessed that he had committed a horrific act that he believed police were already aware of by then. Following this admission, when taken to the police station, Craig confessed his guilt and poured his heart out to the investigating. He revealed how his wife had cheated on him with Sonny and how they had humiliated him in front of his friends at a Year's Eve party. His efforts to save his marriage had cost him his job and stripped away what was left of his respect. The man cried, admitting he did not understand how he had decided to take such drastic steps, and lamented that everyone, including his daughters, had betrayed him. The trial began in December 2010. Craig, advised by his lawyer Thomas Heaney, recanted his initial confession, blaming his actions on mental illness and insanity. It was the only option to avoid the death penalty for the murder of 4 people. Heaney attempted to convince the court that Craig was in a difficult emotional state after being abandoned by his wife for her lover. His children sided with their mother. He lost his job. He had to move back into his parents' home. All these factors contributed to Craig's breakdown, argued the lawyer, insisting that Mr. Kaler committed the crime while insane and not realizing what he was doing. Prior to 1995, there was a law allowing criminals in such cases leniency if they pleaded. However, in Kansas, where both the crime happened and hence where the trial took place, that law had been repealed. Additionally, no evidence of Craig being insane or in an altered state during the acts was found by the prosecution. What emerged instead was cold calculation. Craig bought guns and ammunition ahead of time and purposefully went to Dorothy White's house, knowing his entire family would be there. Each victim was shot twice without any chance of survival. However, he deliberately spared his son, Sean's life. In August 2011, Craig was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. 12-year-old Sean testified at the final hearing that he did not wish for his father's death, as Craig remained his closest living relative. Despite numerous appeals by Craig and his attorneys, the verdict remained unchanged. As of today, Mr. Kaler is still in prison, fighting to have the case reviewed and seeking overturning of the death sentence. Regarding Sean is now an adult who has finished school, obtained an education, and chosen to stay and work in his home state. When a friend turns into a ruthless criminal, you've probably heard the saying, "With friends like these, who needs enemies?" This is often said about those who only pretend to be good friends, but are ready to betray, set up, deceive, and even commit a crime against you at any moment. Such vile actions often hide some selfish motive, but their consequences can be utterly unpredictable, and the bitter disappointment in a close person who betrayed your trust is usually the least of the evils. The case of Sarah Stern shocked even veteran police officers with the cynicism and cold-bloodedness with which her closest friend, whom she had known since childhood and trusted implicitly, dealt with the unfortunate young woman. It was this friend with whom the student shared her future plans and a significant secret that no one else knew. By doing so, Sarah essentially signed her own death warrant, as from that moment until the tragic end, the young man lived with plans on how to make her disappear forever while remaining above suspicion. Surprisingly, this crime could have been prevented if those around had taken the perpetrator's words and actions more seriously. The criminal even laid out his plan on paper, presenting it as a script for a horror movie. But let's dissect this complex story from the beginning to understand what drove such a good friend. Who was Sarah Stern? Sarah Elizabeth Stern was born on March 24, 1997, in the small town of Neptune City in Monmouth County, New Jersey. She was the only and dearly beloved child in the simple family of Michael and Susan Stern. Due to health issues, Mrs. Stern couldn't have more children, so the parents poured all their love into their long-awaited daughter. Sarah grew up as an active, cheerful, and very sociable child. She performed on the school theater stage, was passionate about photography, drew well, and was involved in sports, competing for the local swimming team and playing softball. She dreamed of becoming an artist or designer and was preparing to apply to a local specialized college when a terrible tragedy struck her family. In the autumn of 2013, when 16-year-old Sarah had just graduated from high school and started college in the field of art she had dreamed of, her mother passed away. The woman had fought a long battle with cancer, and it seemed several times that the disease had receded, but the insidious illness returned with new force and ultimately won. This loss was a huge shock for the entire family, especially for the young girl who was always very close to her mother. For a while, Stern fell into depression, but she tried to support her father with whom she lived and who also had a hard time. They also lived with a dog named Buddy, whom the girl adored. Gradually, life began to improve. Sarah made plans for the future, and after graduating from college, she wanted to apply to a prestigious national university in New York. But before that, she dreamed of traveling the world, particularly planning to visit Canada and perhaps even live there for some time. The abandoned car. Michael Stern often had to travel out of state for work, sometimes for weeks at a stretch. But he never worried about leaving his daughter home alone because she was a grown, independent young woman and their town was considered quiet and safe. However, in December 2016, when he flew out for another business trip, trouble came knocking at his door. On the night of December 3, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., a call came into the police station from a concerned man reporting a car abandoned in the middle of the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35. The area was quite deserted, rarely traversed by anyone at night, making the solitary, empty vehicle immediately suspicious. The caller was a taxi driver, taking a shortcut home over the old bridge on the outskirts. He noticed the car parked by the side and stopped to see if anyone needed help. Finding the cabin empty and no one around, he called the police, suspecting the driver might have come here to end their life by jumping into the water below, a sadly not uncommon occurrence at this spot. Responding officers noted the keys left in the admission. There were no signs of blood in the car, nor any signs of a struggle, leading to the initial theory that someone came to the bridge with the intention of voluntarily leaving this world by jumping into the river below. The next step was to find out who owned the abandoned old silver sedan. A database check revealed the car belonged to one Lily Stern, a senior American citizen who recently celebrated her 85th birthday. She lived in the same town, about 10 kilometers from where her car was found. Officers promptly visited Miss Stern's home to understand how and why the elderly woman's car ended up on the bridge at night. Lily was found at home, alive well, and surprised by the police visit. She explained that due to poor eyesight, she hadn't driven for years. Instead, her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, was the one who drove the car. Concerned, Lily immediately tried to call Sarah, but her phone was turned off. She then gave the officers her son's address, where he lived with Sarah. noting that only Sarah should be home since her father was away on a work trip and wouldn't be back until the next week. The mysteriously disappeared student. Sarah was not at home, and the back door to the house was found open, a worrying sign. An initial sweep by the police inside revealed nothing suspicious except for a dog whining locked in one of the bedrooms. There was no indication of any crime taking place. Belongings were in order, and there were no signs of struggle, bloodstains, or any evidence of an intruder's presence. By then, news of the situation had reached Michael Stern, and he was on his way home on the first available flight. The homeowner confirmed everything was in its place, and nothing was missing. Moreover, he stated that all of Sarah's personal belongings were also at home, including her passport, driver's license, and even her mobile phone, which she never parted with. The police shared their initial thoughts with Michael, suggesting his daughter might have gone to the bridge with the intention of jumping, and asked if he had noticed any signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm attempts. Michael admitted that after his wife's passing, Sarah had gone through a period of depression, but with the support of family, friends, and her studies, she managed to recover. Furthermore, she had big plans for the future, dreaming of becoming a designer, wanting to travel and see the world. Nonetheless, on the night of December 3rd, the student vanished from her own home, and a few hours later, her car was found abandoned on the bridge. These were the established facts. Sarah was officially missing, and the investigation had to figure out who she was in contact with that day, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. Testimonies from the first witnesses. It soon came to light that on December 2nd, Sarah Stern had spent nearly the entire day with her best friend, Liam McIntyre, whom she had known since childhood. Liam turned out to be the last person who saw her, potentially shedding light on this mysterious case. Thus, law enforcement quickly decided to speak with him to gather details and try to reconstruct the events of that day. Upon arriving at the McIntyre residence, police were met by Liam's mother, who informed them that her son was sleeping off a night shift. At the officer's request, she woke him up. Seemingly confused about the situation, Liam was surprised to learn about Sarah's disappearance. He confirmed that they had spent most of the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to provide his statement. Liam shared that they had gone to college together in the morning, but decided to skip the last 2 lectures since it was Friday, and they wanted to relax. After class, they went back to her place, played video games, chatted, and shared their future plans. They left the house twice that day, once to grab food from a nearby fast food restaurant, and another time to stop by a local supermarket. Around 7 in the evening, he left Sarah's house to head to his night shift at a 24-hour store, and didn't see her after that. When asked if Sarah had been experiencing any psychological issues or other difficulties, Liam revealed quite a bit. He said that Sarah had been deeply depressed since her mother's passing, teetering between wanting to end it all or run away and start anew. He also mentioned that Sarah had had issues communicating with her father, struggling to find common ground. Liam didn't dismiss the possibility that Sarah might have taken her own life, but noted that shortly before disappearing, she had seriously considered moving to Canada and had even exchanged some money. His claim was confirmed by finding Canadian dollars in a bedside table drawer in Sarah's room, though the amount was so small it wouldn't have covered much. Another close friend and former classmate of Stern's, Preston Taylor, who had been her date to the high school prom and kept in touch after graduation, also gave a statement. He corroborated Liam's account, adding that Sarah was depressed and speculated that she either ran away to Canada or jumped off the bridge. By the end of the conversation, he was in tears, expressing how much Sarah meant to him, search for the body, questioning other witnesses. The theory of Sarah fleeing to Canada, or anywhere for that matter, was almost immediately dismissed since she couldn't have left the country without her passport. Law enforcement then focused on the grimmer theory and organized a massive search effort in the river. The search was complicated by the strong current in that area, which could quickly carry a body miles away from the bridge. Divers were deployed, special equipment was used, and police, along with hundreds of volunteers, scoured both banks of the river, looking for remains or any of Sarah's belongings. Among the volunteers actively participating in the search were also Liam and Preston. Unfortunately, despite all efforts, no trace of Sarah was found. Therefore, law enforcement decided to continue questioning people who knew her and were close to her. That's when a peculiar discrepancy emerged. According to friends and classmates, Sarah was not depressed. She was in great spirits, and none had heard about any problems with her father. On the contrary, she always spoke of him warmly and lovingly. However, after Sarah's disappearance, Liam and Preston behaved as if they had lost a close relative, garnering sympathy from many. But soon, people started to notice that their behavior was odd, as if they were performing for an audience. The two had become very close, but this development occurred about a month before the incident. Therefore, the police decided to take a closer look at the friends and re-interview them, the adopted brother of a wealthy heiress. When Liam was brought back to the station for further questioning, he appeared deeply distressed. The investigator inquired once more about his relationship with Sarah and Preston. Liam shared that the three of them grew up on the same street, attended the same school, and were closely knit, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams. Preston even took Sarah to the prom, but there were no romantic feelings between them. Liam mentioned that he and Sarah were not just friends. He considered her his sister. They even listed each other as siblings on their social media profiles. Sarah had no secrets from him, and she had told him that her mother had left her a significant amount of cash, most of which was kept in the safety deposit box. Allegedly, Sarah didn't trust her father, who also claimed a right to the funds, so she stored the money in the bank, but planned to retrieve it soon to run away to Canada. When this story was relayed to Michael Stern, he was quite surprised and offered his version of events. According to him, his wife began saving money for their daughter's future, for education, a wedding, or a home, from the moment Sarah was born. The cash was kept at home, stored in a shoebox, with many bills being old and some quite worn, though no one thought much of it at the time. After his wife passed away, the father handed the box of money to Sarah, advising her to deposit the old and worn bills in the bank. Sarah followed his advice, depositing some of the money into her checking account for everyday expenses and renting a safety deposit box for the rest. She decided to use it to pay for university after finishing college and to travel the world. Michael sternly denied having any claim to the money for his own purposes. What is the best friend hiding? The revelation that the missing student had a large sum of money led investigators to consider the possibility that someone might have targeted her for financial gain. The investigation then decided to check her safety deposit box and bank transactions. It turned out that a few days before disappearing, Sarah had withdrawn a substantial amount from an ATM and had also visited the bank to take out some cash from her box. Another surprise awaited the detectives. Bank surveillance footage revealed that Sarah hadn't gone to the bank alone, but was accompanied by Liam, who obviously knew about Sarah's banking activities. They decided to question Liam again, specifically why he hadn't mentioned this bank visit, which occurred on December 1st. His hesitation was noticeable, but he explained that Sarah trusted no one but him and had asked him to accompany her to the bank because she was afraid to carry a large amount of cash back home. His explanation seemed logical, and his demeanor was natural. Moreover, it was discovered that a house across from the Stern residence had a security camera that captured the street and part of the neighbor's yard. Footage from this camera confirmed that Liam stayed at Sarah's house until 7 in the evening, then left for work and did not return, while the silver sedan left the garage around 11 at night. A plot straight out of a horror movie. About a month after the girl's disappearance, another acquaintance of hers named Anthony, who had been out of town for several weeks and was unaware of the events, walked into the police station with a bizarre and chilling story. It turned out Anthony had been in the same class with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduating, he dived deep into studying filmmaking, maintaining communication only with Liam, who also had an interest in cinema. Anthony recounted that about a month and a half before Sarah vanished, Liam visited him, and one evening they brainstormed ideas for a horror flick aimed at teenagers. Liam quickly came up with a story about a girl who secretly tells a friend about a large sum of money she possesses. The friend, after gaining her trust and learning all the details, strangles her and dumps her body in a turbulent river. Anthony liked the plot, and they even wrote a couple of pages of the script that evening. However, Anthony soon moved on to another project, forgot about the story, and then left town for a real film shoot where he was working as a camera assistant. Upon his return, Liam unexpectedly called him, inquiring if the police had visited him or summoned him for questioning. Surprised by such questions and learning of Sarah's disappearance and the circumstances surrounding it, Anthony decided to go to the police himself. A horrifying confession. After hearing the new witness's testimony, the authorities suggested Anthony draw Liam into an open conversation and try to elicit a confession from him. Anthony agreed, and a plan was devised. He would invite Liam to collaborate on a project that required renting professional camera equipment, which they ostensibly couldn't afford. Knowing the suspect's aspirations of being in the movie, it was likely he wouldn't miss such an opportunity and might offer the money he took from Sarah. Liam took the bait almost immediately, but suggested they meet in person to discuss the details. A hidden camera was installed in Anthony's car, and he was instructed to carefully coax a confession out of his friend. When the two met, and Liam got into Anthony's car, he looked around cautiously, as if afraid there might be someone else inside. He then handed over an envelope containing $2,000 in old bills, asking if it was enough to rent the filming equipment. Anthony nodded affirmatively, and then inquired where Liam got so much old currency. Liam hesitated, then admitted the money was Sarah's, which he and Preston had taken from her house because the dead don't need it. He didn't go into further details, but his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and Taylor on suspicion of crime. The accomplices tailed. Preston quickly started cooperating with the authorities, striking a deal with the prosecution. He claimed he did not participate in the act itself, but helped his friend cover up the evidence and dispose of the body. According to Preston, Liam began devising plans to take Sarah's money as soon as he learned of its existence. It turned out that Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret even from her best friend for a long time. But when she seriously started planning her trip to Canada, Liam inquired how she intended to fund it, prompting Sarah to reveal the money left by her mother. Liam convinced her that such a sum was safer in a home safe than a bank vault and insisted she withdraw the cash. He even borrowed a significant amount from her right before the tragedy, the same money she had withdrawn from the ATM. When Sarah's father was out of town on a business trip, Liam decided it was time to put his plan into action. He roped in Preston by promising him $25,000. McCatasney decided to handle the dirty work himself, requiring his friend only to help him erase any traces. He convinced Sarah to withdraw the money, failing to check how much she took out. They spent the next day together, with Liam waiting for the right moment. He locked Sarah's dog in another room to prevent it from defending its owner. Approaching her from behind, he began to strangle her. However, the crime proved more challenging than expected. Firstly, the athletic and strong Sarah resisted fiercely, leading to a struggle until she lost consciousness. Secondly, just when he thought she had passed, she would show signs of life. It took the perpetrator about half an hour to be sure Sarah Stern was no longer breathing. Afterward, Liam left her house, heading to work, leaving Preston to step in. He snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, out of the camera's view, dragged the body to the garage, and tidied up the room. A couple of hours later, Liam returned, took a small safe from Sarah's room, placed the body in the car, and drove off in such a way as to avoid being captured by the neighbor's camera. He headed to the bridge where Preston awaited in his own vehicle. Together, they disposed of the body in the river, wiped down the steering wheel, and drove away in Preston's car back to Liam's house to split the loot. They faced a huge disappointment as they found only $10,000 in the safe, not the $100,000 McAtasney had anticipated. However, they decided not to spend the old bills immediately to avoid suspicion. The accomplices buried the safe in a local park, spending only the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. Trial and verdict. Despite Preston's confession, Liam McAtasney steadfastly denied any wrongdoing, attempting to shift the blame onto his friend. McAtasney's lawyer also insisted on his client's innocence, suggesting Taylor acted alone. Moreover, as the body was never found and the circumstances of the disappearance remained unclear, there was a lingering possibility that Sarah was still alive, having vanished without her documents, money, belongings, or phone. A search of Liam's house turned up nothing except a small key fitting the buried safe, identified by Preston. The trial lasted over 2 years, but despite the absence of a body and McAtasney's confessions, his guilt was established through the combination of evidence. The script described months before the incident, the key to the safe found in his home, his words captured in Anthony's car, and the old bills he handed over. Additionally, fingerprints of both Preston and Liam were found inside the safe, and a colleague testified that McAtasney was absent from work for a few hours that night, asking to be covered. Liam McAtasney was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His accomplice, who did not directly participate in the act, received an 18-year sentence for obstruction of justice and hindering the investigation. Preston Taylor is eligible for parole no sooner than 15 years into his sentence. The body of college student Sarah Stern remains undiscovered to this day.